Greetings, sailors and star knots. Welcome to the Captain's Cast on this beautiful Sunday evening. How are you? I am Captain Garrett of the channel Swords and Starships. Welcome to this vessel of entertainment news and woke Hollywood trash fires. Have I got some juicy articles for you today and a couple of really interesting videos. Eric July, George the Giant Slayer have made some excellent callouts about what Disney is up to, and I want to react to a couple of things that they've said. So I have right here a stack of stuff, my sailors and star nuts, that you will enjoy. So buckle up, get ready. First of all, Picard versus The Mandalorian. Two enter, only one may exit. Or is that the line? Is that the Master Blaster line from the Road Warrior? Help me out. So I did a little extra homework before starting the stream today. So we might as well just start with that. And that would be The Mandalorian. So I actually ran into a Mandalorian fan yesterday who's really loving the series, and I felt a little guilty. Okay. Because, you know, look, I'm trying to be a kinder, gentler captain. I'm trying to be a little bit I try not to just immediately unload when I hear, But it wasn't that I was going to criticize. You like what you like. If you're enjoying The Mandalorian, far be it for me to take away any of your fun. And truly, I enjoyed the first season. I really loved it. But I just couldn't help myself because I was so damn curious. Because he's like, "Oh, have you seen The Mandalorian season 3?" And my immediate reaction was like, "Yes, I have." And he's like, "Oh, it's so good. It's so good." And I was like, "I'm not just gonna tear him up, okay? I'm not just gonna." But I just had to know. I was like, "What do you like about it?" And it was a bit pointed. It was more pointed than I intended. And he couldn't really, let's face it, he's kind of, he's younger, just excited, and he didn't have a good answer. The crocodile scene. I'm like, what was with that big crocodile scene in episode 1? What was up with that? Like, there's no point to, oh, well, I mean, you know what it is? It's the blue pill thing. He knows that he knows it's not quite as good as it used to be, but he can't put his finger on it. It's still fun. The Mandalorian still looks cool. I said to him, like, "You love Baby Yoda. Just admit that you like Baby Yoda." He's like, no, he's like, "Oh, I hate Baby Yoda." I'm like, "Sure you do. That's what they all say." So I decided maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I haven't given this show a fair shot. So I dove into what was left of episode 2 and I jumped into episode 3 and I watched all of it. And if there is one kind thing I can say about the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, it is that at least they were episodic. That is, each episode was a kind of self-contained story. And the complaint was that those stories themselves were often kind of boring, or they were filler, or they were a side quest. And sometimes they were really good, and sometimes they weren't. Like, for example, the one with Bill Burr, and he's on the ship heist. I hated that episode. It just, that was one of the episodes a lot of people liked. It just bored me because I wanted to know what was going to happen with the Imperial Remnant, right? But at least there was always this kind of self-contained. They completely lost that. Season 3, episode 2, literally just ends. Okay, spoiler alert. Spoilers for Mandalorian to follow, and for Picard. I'm just gonna warn you because this is Mandalorian versus. So spoiler alert. Okay, Mandalorian dives into the waters. He bathes in the mystical waters, and he gets pulled out by Bo-Katan, and he gets rescued twice. Twice by Bo-Katan in the same episode. And he's like absolutely, and he literally is the most useless he's ever been in this second episode. He stumbles right into traps. he does it. He blunders into the water, right? He gets down into the mystical waters. He's going to bathe to get back his Mandalorian status. And this is one of those times where it was like clockwork. I said, and 3, 2, 1. Oh, he's sucked down into the water. And something sucks him down into the water. We don't see what it is. And I'm like, really? You just escaped the robot. You just narrowly escaped death. And once again, here we go. And then she dives into the water and rescues him. But this is the weird thing, right? She just finds him at the bottom of this lake. She uses her jetpack underwater. They can do that, I guess. He's just laying there at the bottom. She grabs him and she pulls him up. And as she's pulling him up, the ominous light of her jetpack slowly but surely illuminates the face of a monster. It's another giant, indestructible monster. And I have to admit, my eyes rolled because I'm like, oh, no, not another one of these. Please, not another monster fight, just for one episode. But then there was no fight. She just left. Like, okay, so let me get this straight. This creature pulled him to the bottom of the lake, and it's massive. It's like the size of a building. This thing is huge. Pulled him to the bottom of the lake and just left him there at the bottom and was like, oh, nah, he wasn't that tasty. I'm chill. She goes down, grabs him. The creature does not attempt to pursue her. It doesn't even make a reaction. It just lets them go, and away they go. So it pulled him down, knocked him out, and then left him alone. And then she dives in, pulls him out. Okay. So she pulls him out of the water. The episode literally ends right there. There's no cliffhanger. There's no hook. Like, he's been rescued. He's fine. He's safe. The mission's been completed. There's no suggestion of an enemy. There's no final closing scene. It's literally like they just ran out of time. They just ran out of footage and we'll stop there for tonight. It's like when your parents used to read to you at night, and they'd be one more chapter. It's like, oh, I'm getting tired. We'll leave it there. That's the end of this chapter. That's pretty much how it ended. So they've lost even the fine art. Fu Man Blue in the chat. Evening, Fu Man Blue. Welcome in. So they've lost even the fine, subtle art of just ending an episode as its own self-contained story. What is it with Pedro Pascal? Why is it that he has to play roles where his character is an idiot who blunders into obvious ambushes over and over and over again? This is two shows like this year, and I'm really getting tired of it. Bo-Katan, who by the way is awesome. By the way, I have figured out what this show is about. I figured out why it's so bad, because it's about a different Mandalorian, okay? It's about a different Mandalorian. She rescues him. She gets the most badass scenes in this. And how can I put this? There's no dramatic purpose for why he is kidnapped, by these robots in the first place. We don't know anything about them. They're just creatures. They're just dangerous. It's like video game stuff. It's like, speaking of how you write a TV show, you do not write it like a video game. And that is exactly what this is like. Everything that happens is just an obstacle that must happen because the player has to have something. They have to have an opponent. For the Emperor, hail. Welcome to the chat. I watched the third episode. Okay, third episode of The Mandalorian. Again, spoilers for those just joining. Spoilers for The Mandalorian. The first scene of episode 3 of Mandalorian season 3 it's fine. He basically he gets his sample of the waters. He is now a Mandalorian again, and he's ready to complete his quest. And I literally, just in my mind, I saw the kind of like, Fallout or Skyrim when you complete a quest and you get the little banner, the little splash page, quest completed. And it's like, da-dun-da-da-da, and it's like you've increased in experience. Open the menu to level up. That's exactly how that felt to me. I'm like, quest completed. Good job, Mandalorian. And then we completely depart. This, what is it with writers now? We completely depart from the Mandalorian for the whole rest of the episode until the very end to focus on this Imperial remnant character from the first season who is now on Coruscant, and he's basically being rehabilitated by the Republic, the High Republic. Or is it the High? It's the New Republic. High Republic, New Republic, Old Republic. How do you keep them all straight? And I get the sense that this is a little bit kind of meant to be a reference to sort of how we adopted the former Yahtzee scientists after World War II, and we brought them in to the country to to kind of take advantage of their knowledge, and they sort of got off, a little bit easy because of that. I feel like that's kind of what they're doing here. These are basically Imperials that the Republic sort of needs, and they've decided to kind of put up with them being in society again in exchange for their expertise. And there's this whole, and that's basically the whole story is about him. And I won't go into all of it. There's actually some kind of interesting stuff here because I do kind of enjoy seeing the New Republic again. I kind of getting some sense of what the galaxy's like. The problem is I know what the sequel trilogies are, and that just kind of kills it. But this is what I will say. This is the first episode that held some interest for me. This is the first episode, and there's a big attack right in the beginning of the episode. There's a big attack with Imperial fighters descending upon Din Djarin and Bo-Katan. And by the way, Katie Sackhoff she's phenomenal. She's just fantastic. They get in this big TIE fighter battle, and that was the first time in this entire show when I felt my interest just peak just a little bit. Just a little. Ooh, what? Why are they attacked? Ooh, what's going on? Who's after him? That's what it is to have an antagonist in a show. When I said there's no antagonist in the first two episodes, that's what I'm talking about. This is the first time that he had a real antagonist. They should have led with this. Episode 3 is what they should have led with. Problem is, it's paced so badly, they would have had a lot of work to do to make it work because they devote all their time to this scientist. But at least there's some interesting things. There's two storylines about the Imperials and Din Djarin, and there's the suggestion that these two are interconnected, and that Din Djarin is on the radar of these ex-Imperials. That's interesting. There's material there. Unfortunately, it's episode 3. For the Emperor says, I haven't watched The Mandalorian since the middle of season 1. Star Wars is dead to me, I find. I find more enjoyment in listening to people talk about the shows. Me too. The Mandalorian is the one thing that when it came out, I felt Disney Plus did well. I actually thought mistakenly that this was an indication that they were righting the ship after the failure of Solo, the absolute destruction of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, and just the slop that was Rise of Skywalker. I felt like this was a return to form for Star Wars because it felt closer to the ground. It felt more gritty at first. It had elements of the original trilogy that I felt the sequel trilogy did not have. And then it just turned into what everything with Disney is. Everything, once Disney figures out that the algorithm likes something, that's the end of storytelling. That is the end of creativity. That is the end of any kind of nuance. Because the minute they figured out, I mean, they kind of knew, obviously, but the minute they figured out that Baby Yoda was a hit, that was the end of it. That was the end of any chance this show had of being good, well-written, taking risks. All of that was out the window. And now you have Dave Filoni, I believe, I'm pretty sure it was Dave Filoni, confirming, it was either him or Jon Favreau, but no, it was Dave Filoni, confirming that essentially they are going to stick to the sequel trilogy. Like, that is the storyline. They're not throwing out anything. So they had one good show in the first season of Mandalorian. Andor was hugely overrated. There's sort of people that love Andor and there's people that hate Andor, and I'm somewhere in between. Yes, it had episodes that were well written. I legit skipped half of the episodes. I didn't even watch half of the episodes. I just, because I heard that every third episode of Andor was the good one, so I literally would just skip to the third one in each arc of the story. And the finale episode was great. So I watched a third of it, and that third of it was pretty good, which tells you the problem, my dear sailors and star nuts. If they don't retcon the sequels, for the Emperor says, it will never recover, in my opinion. Well, I agree. And it's not showing, believe me, episode 3, I'm doing you a favor. It's like watching paint dry. It's not even that it's bad. It's not even that it's like, Willow bad or anything like that. It's just boring. There's nothing happening. And even the action scenes, which are the best thing The Mandalorian had going, are not that interesting because the moves are cool. The moves are cool. But they have these pea shooter blasters that do nothing now. Like Katie Sackhoff pulls out her twin pistols, right? And she's all, and I swear to God, they even kind of make a pew pew kind of sound, like pew 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 pew. And they do nothing. They do nothing to like humanoid creatures. And I'm like, can we just get rid of the freaking blasters? Like we don't even need them anymore. They don't. It's embarrassing. Really, like give them actual like real guns would probably be more threatening to these creatures. They totally ripped off the Morlocks from the Time Machine in episode 2, by the way. That's some old lore for you. If you've ever seen H.G. Wells, the adaptation of the Time Machine from years ago, they totally were ripping off the Morlocks. And they look cool. They did look cool. But at the end of the third episode, Katie Sackhoff, spoiler alert for Mandalorian, because see someone new in the chat, Starfurry came into the chat. Welcome in. Spoiler alert for the Mandalorian. At the end of episode 3, we get the reveal that Din Djarin is back in the Mandalorians. He is a Mandalorian again, and the scene is, it's a lot of filler. It's not really all that necessary. They literally could have just cut to he's back with the blacksmith. She's pouring the water in. Okay, it's legit. You're back in the Mandalorians. Like that would have been enough. But they have to have this whole thing where he has to argue, you're not welcome here. I have been bathed in the waters of Mandalore. I am welcome here now. Like, no, you're not. You're not welcome here. Go away. And then he's like, yeah, neither are you. Looking at Katie Sack. I'm like, oh, please, just no. I know what's going to happen. Just let him pass so we can. And then the blacksmith, after sort of rechristening Din Djarin, she turns to Katie Sackhoff and says, you too are now a Mandalorian because you pulled him out of the water. So technically you've been also rechristened. And that's when it hit me. That's what the show is about. The show is about her. That's why it's been so boring, because they don't actually care about Din Djarin. They really don't. They haven't given him anything interesting. The most interesting thing they've given anyone was her, because that was the most interesting part of the episode. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, she kind of accidentally became re-Mandalorianed again. And wow, if you had started with that episode, that actually might have been pretty interesting. You just start the series right at the beginning of episode 3. He's down in the mines, a couple of lines of dialogue, because there's enough exposition dumps in this show that it's not like it would hurt anything, because he literally just exposition dumps to Baby Yoda every 10 seconds. He's just like, oh, and this is the mines of this, and this is where our people started with that, and this was the story of that. I'm like, okay, so it'd be easy. You could just have him start out, he's walking through the mines with Baby Yoda, and he's just downloading that, yes, I'm on my quest to become a Mandalorian again, and they said I have to bathe in these waters, and then we just get right into it. And we have and we have the Empires involved, the ex-Empire, and we have Katie Sackhoff shows up, and we don't need the stupid crocodile opener in the beginning. We don't need any of that. We just jump right into it, and that would be okay. That would be an okay first episode. So, mediocrity wins the day now, says Starfurry. Well, oh, I'm sorry. Oh my God, I'm sorry. I said Starfurry. My apologies, sir. That would be Star Fury. That would be Star Fury. There's a difference. So, hey, furries are welcome here. I have nothing, no problem with, but you are not, sir. And you are welcome as Star Fury. So anyhow, I tell you that to tell you this. Let me fix my overlay here. Try this headline. The Mandalorian gives Disney Plus a win and staves off a Netflix sweep. Wow. So The Mandalorian is triumphant. Or is it? The season 3 premiere of Disney Plus's The Mandalorian, the live-action Star Wars show that played a key role in the service's 2019 launch, jumped through hyperspace at the top of the charts in the latest Wrap report, which highlights viewership trends collected from Samba TV's panel of more than 3 million households. By the way, thank you, Samba TV, for providing the only real data that these corporations ever give us to tell us how they're, just how bad they suck. So Samba TV draws from 3 million households over 25 million connected TVs. And, they must hate this. They must, Amazon, Disney, Warner Brothers, they must hate it that Samba TV has this ability because they hide everything, right? Though it defeated a large streaming empire in the process, the victory was weaker than one might have hoped. The long-awaited new season's first episode was less of a standout, measured against other recent Disney Plus releases. A gap of more than 2 years after the second season finale may have allowed some Star Wars fatigue to set in. The episode outpaces the premieres of Star Wars spin-off Andor by nearly 50% in viewership, but still fell short of Loki and Obi-Wan Kenobi's audience by double digits, trailing those launches by 35% and 28% respectively. Meanwhile, the interconnected spin-off series The Book of Boba Fett barely edged out The Mandalorian by 2%. So it's like a mixed bag, right? They kind of beat, let's see, the episode outpaced Andor by 50%, right? And Andor is considered the best written of the Disney Plus Star Wars stuff, right? But it still fell short of Loki, and it still fell short of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and we know how bad Obi-Wan Kenobi was. So what does this tell us? It tells us that Obi-Wan Kenobi is probably as big a reason why The Mandalorian was beaten as anything, because I think people are tired of it. Like, Obi-Wan Kenobi was probably the last straw for a lot of normies that were really into it. They watched Hayden and Ewan come back, and they totally got screwed. Boba Fett edged out The Mandalorian. So Boba Fett beat this show by 2%, the premiere. That is not a victory, my friends. And try this headline from Screen Rant. This week's episode of The Mandalorian is the show's lowest rated ever. The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 3 holds the unfortunate record of being the lowest rated of the entire series. So if we skip to the lead here, audience ratings on IMDb confirm the problem, with The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 3 now holding the record for the lowest score in the series so far. Well, now that's interesting, because Episode 3 was kind of the most interesting of the three, but I don't blame the audience for having that reaction, because really it was 10% of the episode involved the actual Mandalorians, and the rest of it was this just complete backstory of the Imperials. And Last of Us did this too. I'm like, what is it with writers thinking that they can just totally throw out the main plot line of their show and just take a break from it and just tell a completely different story with completely different characters, and they're basically bad guys, so nobody's invested in them. They're not even good bad guys. They're not even scary bad guys. It would be one thing if you spent an entire episode following Darth Vader, but we're following a well-meaning former Imperial scientist who's just trying to get his life back together. And it's like, who cares? So I kind of get it. But that being said, it was the most interesting. Star Fury says, replace the man with a female, better alternative. I wonder where else that has happened. And then he asks, how do you know? You'll have to clarify. How do I know what? I'm happy to tell you. I will tell you all of my secrets. But yeah, so Look, do I think this is a total bait and switch with Katie Sackhoff? It's a little early to tell. If I were to shake the old magic 8 ball, it'd probably say, appears likely. It turns out, though, Katie Sackhoff actually is kind of interesting in the show. I mean, unlike these usual bait and switches where it's like this really irritating female girl boss that's not interesting and is a total Mary Sue, I kind of like Bo Katan. She kind of is a Mary Sue, though. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what sort of heroic arc she could have, but that's beside the point. It's not her show. It's not her show, and she shouldn't be in it. So she shouldn't be the lead. How do you know whether I'm a furry? I don't know. I don't know whether you're a furry. So I just didn't want to get your name wrong. That's all. Star Furry, Star Fury. You know, People choose their names. It'd be like if someone accidentally called me like a commander instead of a captain. It's a huge breach of protocol, and it would make me very upset. And so I'm very sensitive to the needs of my audience. Mandalorian sees a huge drop in viewers for the season 3 premiere. So there you have it, right? This is what we're up against. Star Wars is dying. Star Wars is dying, my friends. And there was no reason for it. They had everything they needed. Meanwhile, are you watching Star Trek Picard season 3? You talk about one series that is absolutely dropping the ball and another series that is inexplicably turning everything around. Although, of course, it's not that inexplicable because we know that Alex Kurtzman has completely abandoned, having infected yet another property, totally gutted it, stuffed it full of a bunch of woke nonsense, a bunch of superficial plots, just utterly destroyed everything that made Star Trek, inspiring and thoughtful, thought-provoking, and just happy. Having removed all of that and realized that the golden goose is now lying dead at his feet, Alex Kurtzman has gone off, and Akiva Goldsman has gone off to another carcass to pick over, and they have left, accidentally, the great Terry Matalas, a true writer who is proving himself to be something of a miracle worker. This is the Scotty of Star Trek writers. This is the miracle worker in the engineering room who's given it all she's got, Captain. I'm giving it all she's got. And it's working. It is absolutely working. These 4 episodes 1 through 4, are masterful. There were things in the first couple episodes that were like red flags to me. And for the first time ever in this series, red flags turned out to be me being paranoid. And, it's not perfect. It has moments where I feel there's a little bit of the Kurtzman-ness still stuck in there. Like they use the F word all the time in ways that Starfleet officers just wouldn't. Picard says the F word in ways that are frankly bizarre for his character. It's even if everyone else curses, Picard would not. He just would not. He's never been that kind of man, if you understand his. So anyway, so there's that. The sets are very dark and foreboding, and the plot itself is actually pretty dark. It's a pretty sinister story. But there's a difference, though, because when it was sinister in the first 2 seasons of Picard and in Star Trek Discovery and in Strange New Worlds, there is a distinctly dystopian layer to it. There is this kind of cynical, I would call it a poor man's Game of Thrones layer to everything, which is the implication that the worst of human behavior will always eventually show itself. Great civilizations will always fall apart. The Federation is old and aging, and of course it's starting to become corrupt. So, and really even in Discovery, they portray the Federation as kind of warmongering with the Klingons. So the difference here, though, is that there's an actual external enemy that has invaded the Federation, and it's an old enemy. So, spoiler alert, if you have not seen the first 4 episodes of Star Trek Picard, I will not speak about some of the very best payoffs, but there's certain basic story elements that, for the sake of conversation, I just simply must. So essentially, the Dominion, or not really the Dominion, but essentially a rogue splinter group of the Dominion and the Changelings, is actually the enemy in this story. And it actually, I don't know if this is where they're going with it, but this might actually be retconning all the damage of the first two seasons in a pretty clever way, because one of the worst things in season one is that they reveal that Captain Rios, the character in the first season, the reason he had quit Starfleet, oh my God. If you could only, if you haven't seen this, the horror of this is so, I don't even know where to begin, but how can I even summarize this? There's this implication that Captain Rios in season one, something traumatic happened in Starfleet, and he lost all faith and he quit Starfleet, and they kind of, all the whole season, they're kind of referring to this and what is it? What happened, right? Yeah. And finally, he reveals what it is. He was on a diplomatic mission as the first officer of his ship, and they arrived at this planet to have a diplomatic talk with a race of synthetics. It's been a while since I saw it mercifully. I just remember there were these two synthetic android ambassadors that were coming aboard the Federation ship for peace talks, which is a very typical Star Trek thing. But because there was this dumb plot about a synthetic ban, which is really kind of a ripoff of Mass Effect. I mean, it's like they read the wiki on Mass Effect and just ported that over to a Star Trek story where it doesn't fit and makes no sense if you understand all the history of Data and the Doctor on Voyager and so forth. But anyway, there's a synthetic ban. They bring these two ambassadors aboard, and suddenly Starfleet sends a coded message to the captain ordering him to execute the two ambassadors. And this Starfleet captain is like, oh, what do I do? Like, there's like 5 things in that would never happen in the Star Trek universe. Starfleet would never give that order. But if Starfleet gave that order, no Starfleet captain would follow it. But if a Starfleet captain were inclined to follow it, it would only be because there was some absolutely extraordinary circumstance in which the Starfleet officer themselves was somewhat convinced there was a good reason for it. But even if that were the case, an ethical Starfleet officer would conscientiously object and refuse orders. Like, it happens all the time in the Starfleet show, in the Star Trek shows. So that right there is absurd. But then the captain who tried to like protest the order is ordered, no, you are to go in this room and you are to phaser these two ambassadors. And what the hell was it that I think Rios witnessed his captain shoot himself to avoid doing it, or he did it and then he shot himself. I forget what it was. It was something suitably awful. Trust me on this. And I remember thinking, this is garbage. Like, this show is absolute hot garbage. And I was so mad. I was so mad. I was pretty pissed off already at that point, but that was it. I was like, this series might be retconning all of that, because the idea that Starfleet was so corrupt in the first season, they attributed it to Romulans. It might actually be that the Changelings have been in there screwing things up for like years. So I kind of hope they lean into that, because I think that would be super cool. So that's the difference. Terry Matalas is implying that, yes, there is a terrible threat to the Federation, but it's not because the Federation is a dystopian hell. It's because they're up against a real threat, and our heroes are the only ones that know of this threat and must fight it. And it's really good. And the characters are nuanced. Let me know if you want to hear more on Picard, but I've probably gone on too long. I feel like we must move on. I'm kind of warming up the stream here, letting people come in. Fourth, Star Fury says, agreed, melodic method. Wow, did I miss something for melodic method? Oh yeah, melodic method said Star Wars died because they didn't pull together a group of people we cared about as much as we did Luke, Han, and Leia. That is an excellent point. That is an excellent point, because it's not just that they didn't pull together a group of characters we cared about. It's that they're kind of incapable of it, right? Like, nothing that Disney does is original anymore. I mean, they do occasionally have something. Usually it's a Pixar thing. There is the occasional Moana or Encanto that actually succeed, that are something new. But most of the time, they are digging up the graves of just old things, and they're just feeding it into the wood chipper of the algorithm. They're just, there it goes. Now give me money. Give me beautiful money. That's all they do. Uh, they had an opportunity to make Din Djarin an interesting character. He's you know, as the critical drinker would say, he's a plank of wood. He's an absolute plank of wood. He just doesn't have he had he had time to develop a personality. You can do the sort of pale rider character, right? You can do the kind of stoic, taciturn, bounty hunter. There's room for that. What you need though is you need a foil. You need a character that's kind of the opposite to play off of that character. That's usually the best way to get at it. Why do you think buddy cop movies work so well? Buddy cop movies work well because you have two characters that are at odds with each other. One is chatty and witty, but the other is serious and he's too old for this shit. That's how you get at a character like that. But the problem is they attach to him a merchandising opportunity called Baby Yoda, colloquially also known as Grogu, who is just a baby who just makes cute baby sounds and can't contribute to like almost anything. And the sad part is now he is contributing with like backflips, and he's actually kind of doing some stuff, and it's worse because he looks like a puppet. It's like, when you're playing with, it's literally like when I was a kid and I would try to make my own home movies and I would animate my toys doing something, I would just throw them across the room. That's what this is like. He literally is he's a puppet who's being thrown. It's not good. It's not good. One of their problems is they actually kind of had some interesting possibilities with Gina Carano's character. And we know what happened there, didn't we? Yeah. The woke propaganda machine could not tolerate dissent, and therefore we had to get rid of her. We had to get rid of her because, God forbid, there actually be a plausible and interesting, strong female character. Like the first time everyone is united. Everyone agreed on Gina Carano. All the people who were annoyed with all the girl bosses loved Gina Carano. Why? Because she was believable and she was fun and she was interesting. And like the scene where she was sniping in that one episode was freaking badass. Imagine what could have been if they had kept her as like a permanent partner for Din Djarin. Even if they had maybe just built a little crew where Carl Weathers was kind of in the ship with him. Who knows? I mean, Carl Weathers probably would have been, he's a quest giver now. He's the quest giver. You go, return to, I don't know the guy's name in the show. Return to Carl Weathers to get your next quest. Bring him back the object that he told you to go get. That's what he is. If it was me, says For the Emperor, I would do either the Great Hyperspace Wars. Ooh, that sounds interesting. I'm actually not a super Star Wars. I'm more of a Star Trek guy. So for me, I'm kind of a normie when it comes to Star Wars. So I actually don't know what the Great Hyperspace Wars are, but they sound interesting. Unfortunately, I didn't read like any of the extended universe. I heard about it. Like I knew about Shadows of the Empire, stuff like that, but I never actually read any of that myself. Unfortunately, Disney would just mess it up. You are right, For the Emperor. They would. Or do a 100 plus years time jump and start a new story. By the way, this is what Mass Effect should do. This is why I thought Mass Effect Andromeda was a terrible idea. Because it's like, no, just move the story forward like 300 or 400 years. And Shepard's story, you can literally just do what they did in Dragon Age Inquisition. Sorry, departure to gaming here for a second. Have it be that you just select what Shepard's choices were in your past playthroughs, and there's enough time that you could sort of retcon any of the weird endings in the Mass Effect in a way that that's plausible enough. And then you could still have Liara because she's still there. Same deal with Star Wars. Just go forward. Frankly, Star Trek could even do that. Star Trek could have gone forward a couple hundred years, but no, instead they opted to do Star Trek Discovery and just regress the story. Old Trek is the only Trek. Define old Trek. Here's my definition of true Trek. That would be the original, what I call the original 5 series. Of course, original series, Next Generation, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and yes, Enterprise. I love Enterprise. Had its problems, But if it had gotten a season 5, it would be a very different history that we remember. I guarantee that. For the Emperor, well, you kind of answered my question. Original TNG and DS9 are pretty good. I agree. TNG was my original because that was what got me into Star Trek. So TNG has and Patrick Stewart's Captain Picard used to be and is becoming again my favorite character in all of Star Trek. But I really warmed up to Enterprise. I liked it. Had the first couple seasons are like really hit or miss. There's a couple great episodes, but once you get to about season 3, I felt like Scott Bakula really settled into the role, and it was a great like predecessor to a modern Starfleet captain, and that's what I liked about it. He was a little more rough around the edges, but he still had that air of civilization that all Starfleet officers have, and I liked that. And I am a Voyager fan. Voyager had, of all the dumbest episodes, every one of them had a stinker or two, but Voyager definitely had more than its share of stinkers. But it definitely, I like Janeway. I like Janeway. Season 1 and 2 of Picard are terrible, but I'm liking season 3. That I consider that an understatement. Season 1 and 2 of Picard are a crime. It is the most vile, dystopian, just disgusting, like literally disgusting portrayal of a Star Trek universe I've ever seen. And that's saying something because there's such a thing as Lower Decks, which is the Rick and Morty Family Guy version of Star Trek. Who in the hell thought that was a good idea? It's an insult, but Picard is even worse though, because Picard is actually trying to be Star Trek, whereas Lower Decks is just an insult to Star Trek. And fine, it's an insult, I can just steer clear of it. But Star Trek Picard took a character that had real weight in the series and just destroyed him. So I consider it much worse. And maybe there's a little personal animosity there because Picard was my character. But yeah. Star Fury says she looks like she can kill a man genuinely. That would be Gina Carano. And by the way, I think she could genuinely, because she was an MMA fighter. So, For the Emperor says, fetch quest, lol. Star Fury says, have a child of Shepard and Liara take the story forward. Oh, I see who we liked in their playthrough. Liara is a popular choice. I can't fault you for that. Liara is a popular choice. No problem with games here. I love Mass Effect and agree Andromeda was a terrible idea. That being said, I enjoyed Andromeda because I liked the exploration. I do think that's the best BioWare's ever done with a kind of open world thing. And there were some choices you make on the individual missions that sort of altered like the geopolitical organization of a planet, and that was fun. And I kind of like seeing what the hell was that thing called? It was like the Citadel, but it wasn't the Citadel. I forget what it was, but it's the big space station, and you kind of see it upgrade as you improve things in the galaxy. But that being said, the actual story itself was terrible. The main story was boring, and it was melancholy. It was melancholy to be exploring this other galaxy, but then kind of wondering, but whatever happened back in the Milky Way? Like that's a melancholy thing to me. For the Emperor says, Voyager was tolerable. I didn't love it or hate it. You might give it a second watch, having seen what we've seen. Like, it has some of the best, like kind of moral conundrum episodes. Like, there's a great episode I really love. Actually, it's the penultimate episode of the series is one of my absolute favorites, called Renaissance Man. And if you like The Doctor, which I do, that was a great episode. But I just watched the episode Author, which is about how the Doctor has written a holo novel and the rights have been stolen from him because he's not really a person under Federation law. And there's this great, they have to argue this case that he has rights, and it's classic. It's just a classic. But there's also the real story also, though, is the holo novel he wrote is sort of defamatory toward the Voyager crew because it's kind of, he uses all their images and it implies that they're these awful people. And he's like, no, it's just fiction. And they're like, but Doctor, everyone's going to think this is about us and we're your friends. And it's a great episode, especially as a writer. I identify with the Doctor in that episode because all of my worst characters are based on my friends. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Uh, Starfury says, when they retconned the Year of Hell in Voyager, they killed the series for me. Well, that's an interest. That is my favorite. That is one of my favorite episodes of Voyager. Was the 2-part Year of Hell. It's my go-to. I watched that episode. I have a go-to in DS9, which is In the Pale Moonlight. That's like my, if I just give me the best you got, I go to the Pale Moonlight in DS9. But uh, if I'm in Voyager, it's often Year of Hell. Also, Equinox is a good 2-part episode. Year of Hell, though, I see your point, because it's one of those episodes that involves time travel in a pretty clever way, I will admit. But by the end of it, they've undone everything. So it's like, oh, we reset the timeline, so none of that ever happened. And that is a really, I get it. It's like we woke up from the dream, and what's so cool too is that whole, literally, it's 2 episodes that chronicle an entire year of Voyager just under siege, and the ship is falling apart. It's beaten to hell. And I think what it was is they had to reset the timeline because it took so much damage. They just couldn't plausibly bring it back from that. It was like the ship is basically unsalvageable by the end of it, which was cool. It was cool to see that, because it's like we never get to see the ships we love put through the absolute ringer. And so I get your point. I get your point. But I like that episode. King Tiberius says 100% agree with that. Year of Hell? Maybe you're agreeing to that. I get your point there. Starfury says better fight mechanic than the previous games, meaning Andromeda. And he says better version is Measure of a Man, talking about the Data episode where Data has to fight for his rights in Star Trek TNG. And yes, it was a better episode, and it was a great Picard episode because he had to argue for those rights. But going back to the Andromeda thing, better fighting mechanics, agree on the gameplay, but there's one thing I hated in Andromeda, which is they basically introduced this system where you could just be all classes. And all you had to do was build a class profile, and then and it became it's like a hotkey. You just switch to that. So if you want to be a biotic, play as a biotic. But then if you get tired of that, you can just switch over to soldier, and now you're a soldier, and you've got all the soldier skills. And I thought, okay, well, that just takes all the fun out of building a skill tree. And so I thought that was a really annoying choice. And also, I enjoyed upgrading the weapons, but literally 20 hours in, I had the best weapon, and I never need to upgrade another weapon again. I'm like, I've got my ideal armor, I've got my ideal gun, I don't need anything else. And that kind of killed some of the fun of it too, because after a certain point, Dragon Age Inquisition was that way, by the way. You get to about hour 20, and I'm like, God mode. Just God mode. And I don't even do probably 20% of the side quests in that game because it's so damn huge. Wrangler says, hail, sir. Hail and welcome to the Captain's Cast on this Sunday evening. Just hoping to bring you a little bit of entertainment. I get a little melancholy at the end of the week. There's no more live streams to watch. F&T's over. I've already seen Open Bar and Hollywood on the Rocks and Tuesday night's main event. And you're getting a window into my playlist. So I get a little melancholy. So you know what? I will step in. And see what I can do. Starfury says, love the episode, not the ending. Yeah, meaning Year of Hell in Voyager. I'm with you on that. So bringing it back to Picard, there is... So episode 5, which I'm going to review this week, so keep an eye out for my review of Star Trek Picard. I'm really putting as much love and care into these reviews as I can. And check out my episodes 3 and 4 review, because it pretty much covers everything I love about this series. But episode 5 is kind of starting a new arc, really, because episode 4 concluded, it's almost like the end of a 2-part episode in the series, and now we're starting a new episode, but the story's sort of continuing because we still have the same threat. And what's really interesting is that it's a slower paced episode, but it's still great. And okay, so this is okay. Let me know if you mind spoilers, because I'm going to spoil something here. 3, 2, 1. Wrangler says, you're talking Star Trek. I'm so here for it. Awesome. Let me know, chat. Let me know if you want me to move on, because I got plenty. I got a big stack of stuff for you today. Uh, so yes, I will be working on that review, Star Fury, and you will see it this week. As soon as I can get it done, preferably before the next episode airs, because I'm trying to keep up. But man, there's so much to do. Um, so Ro Laren comes back in episode 5, right? And my Kurtzman, post traumatic stress syndrome flared up a little. I started to have flashbacks. I'm like, oh God, oh no, this is Icheb all over again. Because if you don't know, in the first season of Picard, if you remember the character Icheb, which is a little bit of an obscure character, I get it, but he was a supporting character that came on in the last couple seasons of Voyager. He was an ex Borg that Seven of Nine had adopted, and like he kind of became a surrogate son to her. And I really loved that relationship, and I really loved his character. And I also liked that they were bringing in new stories with new characters as the show progressed. It made it feel less like every episode was just resetting the status quo. So I enjoyed that. And what does Star Trek Picard do? Okay, they open an episode with Icheb on an operating table. It's straight out of Hostel. Like, it is straight out of an Eli Roth torture porn movie. They have him strapped to this dingy table, and this evil, cackling sadist is just laughing as she's pulling out his eye socket, and she's drilling into him, and she's taunting him as she does it. Like, it's literally, you're watching Hostel. And it was beyond horrifying. It was so gross and bloody. And Seven of Nine shows up and kills her, and it's like, oh great, the bad guy got it. That didn't solve anything for me. And what does Seven of Nine do? She has to hold his hand, and she's crying, and he's like giving her the phaser to kill him, and he begs her to put him out of her misery. And that's the cold open of the episode. And why did they do all that? So that Seven of Nine would have a reason to want revenge on some dumb character that was the villain for that episode. That's all. This is how freaking awful Kurtzman Trek is. It's so soulless. It is so vile. It is so bereft of any humanity. It so misunderstands anything in Star Trek. And I'm not even saying that Star Trek does not have tragedy and sadness and death in it, because it does. It's one of the main themes that the characters are often dealing with: mortality. And what does it mean to lose someone in battle? But this is not that. This is, they literally tortured and killed a character that they knew Star Trek nerds would remember. Like, only a nerd who really liked Voyager would have remembered Icheb. And so for normies, they could have picked any character. They could have just picked a new character. They could have had it just be that, oh, this was a lieutenant that she trained at Starfleet Academy off screen. That would have been more reasonable, because then it would have just been, okay, yeah, because that's literally all we get of his character. All we need to know is that he just got butchered in front of our eyes. So if that's the case, why not just use a character that was never in any previous show? But no, they go and they find a character just obscure enough that the diehards, won't be too put off by it, but just knowledgeable enough to give you member berries. Just enough to just twist the knife, to just use that little piece of lore that you have as a Star Trek fan to just rip your freaking heart out. It's vile. I despise Kurtzman. He's a shit writer. He has no talent, because a talented writer, as I just pointed out, would have used a character that we hadn't met before. That would have been a good choice. Or make the whole story about Seven of Nine and Icheb fighting this battle together, and maybe he dies at the end. That I could have maybe accepted. He dies heroically. So I tell you that to tell you this. Episode 5 of Picard Season 3 begins, and Ro Laren comes back. And I'm like, oh, here we go. Here we go again. And I really didn't like it. I didn't like about 30% of the episode right off the bat, because she's interrogating Picard, and Picard is angry at her, justifiably so. But she's acting like a Kurtzman character for like the first third of this episode. She's acting like a Kurtzman character. She's suspicious. She's angry. She doesn't have any time for Picard and his bullshit. And I'm starting to get Kurtzman vibes, right? And then a conversation occurs in the holodeck in which Picard and Ro Laren kind of have it out. And you realize that she's suspicious he's a changeling. And she's trying to figure out if he's a changeling or not. And then you realize, oh, so there's a reason why she's so suspicious of everyone. There's a reason why she's so guarded. And then the episode progresses, and it turns out that once Rolaren can trust Picard, now she needs him. And there is this old wound between them that starts to get worked out. And then in the final moments of the episode, big spoiler alert here, she is ambushed by the changelings, and a bomb is planted on her shuttle, and she's about to die. And essentially, she uses the opportunity to give Picard and the rest of the crew everything they need to fight the changelings that she acquired at great cost, and then she goes out like a badass. And she basically uses the bomb that's on her shuttle as a kind of kamikaze to buy them time, to like crash into the ship and buy them time. And I thought at first, my knee-jerk reaction was, oh, so they brought in another legacy character just to kill her off. But then after a couple of seconds of letting it sink in, I suddenly realized, but no, that actually fit. That actually was a good ending for that character for a lot of reasons. But the main difference between this and Kurtzman Trek is that there was good reasons for all of her suspicion and all of her hostility. There were good reasons for it. And there was a progression of the dramatic arc by the end of the episode because her and Picard kind of start to work things out, and there's a really powerful emotional beat at the end between them. And finally, her death is not meaningless. Her death is not just another Game of Thrones. It's like, because I'm fully, this is the thing, really low skill writers these days love to try to do Game of Thrones in everything. I call it the Game of Thronesing of everything. Don't misunderstand. George R.R. Martin is an excellent writer who has a philosophy about dramatic storytelling that for him creates a really interesting world and creates really interesting stories. Whether you like him or hate him, that's just, he has a style, and that style is earned. But in the hands of other writers who see all the shock violence in Game of Thrones, they learn the wrong lesson from it. And so they compensate for their bad writing by just putting shocking, dystopian, you thought this character was a good person, now they're murdering someone. And it's like, no, that's not why Game of Thrones is good. And also, even if that were the case, that's not for Star Trek. That's not what you put in Star Trek. It's not the same thing. And so this is the difference. Kurtzman would have killed off a character like that for almost no reason. Her purpose in the show would have been to show Picard what a failure he had been and how wrong he had been about everything. And then she would die just for shocking dramatic effect, and probably in a more grisly way. So that being said, this show, I get flashbacks, okay? I get flashbacks. And if you have watched any of the old first two seasons of Picard, you could be forgiven for having that reaction to some of these things, thinking, oh no, they're doing it again. Stay with it. Stay with it. It's not what you think. Spoil away, says the chat. Well, good. I guess I did spoil. Girl boss PTSD. Don't we all have that? And I have more to tell you about that, my friend. Yeah, that's not Trek, King Tiberius says. Well, if you're talking about the Kurtzman stuff to which I was referring, I agree with you. If, on the other hand, you disagree with my assessment of season 3, please do let me know. Kurtzman is a complete gamer word. Oh, you ain't kidding. You ain't kidding, Star Fury. And I share your Star Fury at Mr. Kurtzman, let me tell you. What do I have for you, my dear sailors and starnauts, in the stack of stuff? Let's pull up some other headlines. Have you seen Shazam? Let me know in the chat if you've seen Shazam, because I have not seen it, and I don't plan on seeing it. I'm not just the biggest DC guy in the world to begin with. So, I started watching the first movie, and this is the thing, and this goes for all superhero anything, because I like comic books. I'm a Spidey fan. I ride or die for the rest of my life, and I love Captain America. I loved Captain America in the comics before he became popular in the MCU, because frankly, I am a patriotic American, hand on my heart, every national anthem, I shed a tear. So, of course I love Captain America. Never thought I would see him become a compelling movie character, by the way, because he's Captain America. You're not allowed to love America in the modern world. So the fact that they actually made him a lead in the MCU, and they actually made him a leader as he was in the comics, and they actually made him patriotic and a war hero. I was really shocked, frankly, that they did all that with his character, and it was great. Chris Evans as that character was amazing. But that being said, when it turns into magical gobbledygook, I'm out. And this goes for comics. This goes for any superhero stuff. Once it turns to a bunch of magical junk, once it turns into kid stuff, I'm not into it. Like, I love Lord of the Rings. I am not a Harry Potter fan. And if you are, more power to you. Let me know what your house is, Hufflepuff, or nobody's Hufflepuff, or Ravenclaw, whatever. It just ain't my thing. And so I started watching Shazam, and the minute the Council of Wizards or whatever showed up, I was like, oh, no, I'm done. Thank you, but this is not for me. So, what else? Okay, I'm pulling up my headlines. Just bear with me 1 minute here. I have a whole bunch. I have a whole row of headlines on this topic. What is the chat saying? Because I want to know if anyone has seen. Have you seen what I have seen? Or in this case, what I have not seen. For the Emperor says no, and I don't plan to, meaning seeing Shazam. I did just see Champions today, though it was quite enjoyable and would recommend it. Champions, I have not heard of this. I'm out of the loop on this one. LOTR is the GOAT, and you are correct. Lord of the Rings. In fact, I was asked on a previous stream, what is my favorite film? And the only answer I can ever come up with is The Lord of the Rings. Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings is my favorite film. And without going into the whole diatribe, yes, I know. It's technically 3 different films, but I don't care, because to me, that's one single film, and I can't pick my favorite. I can't, because they're all my favorite. And they all deserve to be my favorite, what's more. Okay. Yes, I want to talk about this headline next. So try this headline. Oops, not that one. That one's for later. Shazam! Fury of the Gods box office fizzles with 30 million. Who asked for a sequel, and who is the target audience? This from Comic Book News by Matt McGloin. Just as I expected, Shazam! Fury of the Gods has fizzled at the box office, as it is now estimated to open lower at $30 million. Initially, the estimates were offering a $35 million opener to as high as $40 million. But following the Friday box office and pre-sales for the weekend, the Shazam! Fury of the Gods box office is likely to be around $30 million. Regardless of whatever number the box office comes in at, it's not good, as the first movie opened at $53 million, and I would argue that's because after the just absolute funeral dirge that was Batman versus Superman, I think people were ready for something that was a little bit more fun, right? But now this is looking like Shazam 2 is a big drop-off of 44% from the 2019 release. So I just think people have had it. I think the jig is up. You know, this was one of my main theses, if that's the correct plural. My thesis in my previous stream was that the jig is up with actors, with talent. Real talent is starting to figure out, stay away from these movies. And now audiences are starting to figure out every single one of these is going to be like this. Every single one of these is going to be like this. And it doesn't help that nobody can tell you what James Gunn is going to do with this. Is it going to be a reboot? Is it going to be a partial reboot? Is it going to be a continuation? Nobody knows. James Gunn doesn't know. I'm convinced James Gunn doesn't know. That guy, I oscillate between admiring the guy and just thinking he's a mess. Like, he seems very confident. You notice that? Like, whenever James Gunn is talking about this, he's very confident. And man, he engages with the fans, I think, in a pretty respectful way. I haven't seen him. I was a little bit hard on him at first because I kind of thought he was doing that typical Hollywood thing where he blames the fans. But actually, you know, he seems to actually try to answer questions. I give him respect for that. But I don't get what his whole plan is, because it ain't looking good. Well, I'll just skip. The headline's all I need on this one anyway. Shazam Fury of the Gods fails to spark excitement in China. And it's like, basically, it's going to make me turn off my ad blocker. Yeah, well, I'll figure it out later. Basically, it only made like $8 million in China, which is like, wow, that's bad. Uh, okay. Let me see if I can fix this. I will turn off my ad block. Pause on this site. Hello. Will that do it? Okay, cool. Shazam 2's biggest issues are a growing superhero movie problem, and this is the point I want to get to. And this is from Comic Book News. Wait, what is it? CBR.com. CBR.com. Shazam Fury of the Gods is a weak sequel due to its constant comedy, and it's a bad habit that it picked up from the MCU. Spoiler alert. Shazam Fury of the Gods is now thundering into theaters, but critics and fans are a bit disappointed. The reception is notably a lot less positive than the first movie, and it's due to one problem in particular. Unfortunately, this problem is one that's outright plaguing superhero movies as a whole. And I would argue not just superhero movies, it is spilling into everything. It's in Kurtzman Trek. Kurtzman Trek suffers from this problem. Fury of the Gods constantly makes jokes. Halo, the Halo show, suffered from this problem. Constantly makes jokes and utilizes immature humor, namely at the worst of moments. And that's the key. At crucial dramatic moments, it interrupts the process of storytelling all the time. It's a trend that truly became popular with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the formula is running thin even there. With comedy constantly bringing the movie down, its more dramatic elements are completely undermined. Several scenes in Fury of the Gods are full of jokes and comedy to the point where the movie is almost trying too hard to earn a laugh out of the audiences. The city of Philadelphia outright mocks the Shazamily, dubbing them the Philly Fiascos, and making them out to be complete failures. And I will just say, that can work if the whole point is they are sort of a, like Guardians of the Galaxy. They're kind of losers in the beginning, but Peter Quill manages to pull them together, and they actually pull off this really awesome, rescue of this planet, and then people love them, and then they're the Guardians of the Galaxy. And so this can work. It's just the problem is when there's never that payoff, it's tiresome. It's just very tiresome. In his Shazam form, almost every line that Billy Batson says, and this is crucial, in his Shazam form, every line he says is a sometimes extraneous reach for a laugh, even though his alter ego acts completely different. And this is fascinating. So they're basically saying the kid alter ego does not act like this zany, wacky wisecracker all the time. But for some reason, when he turns into the adult Shazam form, now all of a sudden he's a wisecracking kid. And it's like, that just shows you how unskilled these writers are, because they're not doing the character work that you need to do to make convincing characters that get you invested. The Daughters of Atlas are sometimes used for comedy, which doesn't enhance their threat level. That's another thing. Ant-Man Quantumania did this with MODOK. They want you to have concern when the villain shows up and is threatening the heroes, but then they turn him into a big dumb joke that the heroes are openly mocking and laughing at. And it's like, that only works when you're literally not supposed to feel any fear from this villain. And best example I can think of is the beginning of Avengers 2, when they're taking out what's left of Hydra up in the mountains in Switzerland or whatever. And they're sending out all their guys to fight the Avengers. And one of the bad guys comes in and he's like, get out there and stop them. And they're like, it's the Avengers. They're like, what are we supposed to do? And it's like, that's funny. That's funny, because I'm not supposed to be afraid for the Avengers at this point in the movie. That's the only time it's acceptable, because we're acknowledging that these are not a real threat to the Avengers. They are a minimal threat. So even the wizard Shazam himself is reduced to a comedic element, and he rarely comes off as a wise or almost divine sage because of it. So even the serious characters can't be taken seriously. Imagine if the Sorcerer Supreme in the first Doctor Strange movie was making fun of herself and acting like an idiot all the time. The movie wasn't the best to begin with, but it never would have worked if Tilda Swinton had been making a mockery of herself and almost kind of winking at the camera and being like, look, I'm like a serious actor, but I'm in this movie. Likewise, key scenes that should be solemn are many times coupled with unnecessary humor. For instance, when Billy turns back into his mortal form in front of his adoptive parents, Rosa and Victor Vasquez, the scene is almost ruined by his dad questioning, is he the reason the house is constantly being struck by lightning? So I haven't even seen this movie, but I can already picture it. I know exactly what it is. He gets caught turning back into the kid, and he's just revealed his secret identity to his parents. Oh no! And it's just a stupid, dumb quip. Are you the reason that our house is getting struck by lightning? And it's like, cue the laugh track. Oh, that's so good. And see, this is the thing. The reason Star Trek has been so bad is, as Robert Meyer Burnett correctly observed, it's in the hands of people who don't like it, or at least it was up until now. Same thing with these superhero movies. They are in the hands of people who do not like these things. And I have another article, my dear sailors and star nuts, it is an absolute killer that is going to absolutely make this case. And it's not even written by, bounding into comics or, the typical pundits. Like, this is in their words. They make this case. And so stay tuned for that. But I'm building my case right here. So it's a recurring issue, and it's the biggest reason why the sequel feels so inauthentic compared to its predecessor. The problem isn't confined solely to the second Shazaam, however, as a rival studio is now discovering, well, now who could they be talking about? The popularity of the MCU humor ruined superhero movies. I could not disagree more. This is not what ruined superhero movies. Idiot writers who are writing by committee and algorithm who think the MCU humor is popular is what ruined these movies. Let's check in with the chat before I get into the rest of this. DC is going to lose money hard. They really are. And they James Gunn seemed like their best effort to try and right this ship, and it ain't working out. For the Emperor, the movie with Woody Harrelson, he has to coach a special ed basketball team for community service. Oh, that sounds good. I like Woody Harrelson. He's fantastic in True Detective. That was one of his best roles. Star Fury says James Gunn is about to face a disaster of mythical proportions, and the nasty part of myself is going to laugh like a maniac. Polo Surf says, taste the rainbow. Is that a reference to Shazaam? I wouldn't be surprised. Star Fury, Wisdom of Solomon, clearly forgotten about. Polo Surf says, you should watch it. Okay. If you're talking about Shazaam, you're going to have to twist my arm a little. That's all I'm saying. The superhero movie genre would seem to be cyclical, and those who once scoffed at the dark and gritty nature of the Snyderverse are now growing bored and even annoyed at how other superhero movies keep trying to be excessively funny. See, they always blame the fans. They, even when they're not trying to, defame the fans, they're still blaming the fans. Because, oh, you see, people are cyclical. They have moods. Yet, no, we only have one mood. We enjoy things that are well written. We enjoy engaging stories where we have an emotional stake in the outcome. There were plenty of quips and jokes in a Captain America Civil War. But once we got to that finale between Captain America and Iron Man, it was deadly serious. And it was powerful. And it was emotional. I got chills when the reveal about the death of Tony's parents happens. It's like, and all the jokes go away. There's no jokes after that point. It's like, these two men are going to kill each other. And it's kind of scary. It's a little bit, because up until that point, I never really believed Cap and Iron Man were really against each other, and they weren't. And I kind of thought that's as far as it would go. And it actually surprised me when there was one more little shoe to drop, and then it got deadly serious for the last 10 minutes of the film. And that's the thing, is that you can have comedy and levity. You kind of have to have it. I think every Band of Brothers has levity in it. If you watch war films, there's levity in war films. There's gallows humor. But you can't have everything. You can't make fun of what you're doing. You can't make fun of the universe, because what that really is, this is the problem. There's a type of comedy that is within the world, and then there's a type of comedy that is a fourth wall break. That is, the movie is making fun of itself, and by extension, kind of making fun of you for being dumb enough to watch it. And that's the problem. They are breaking the fourth wall with the comedy, and they've got to stop doing that. But so it's not the fans, it's that the fans are being failed by these creatives. So getting back to the article, this can even be seen in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Oh, you think? What a pile of garbage that movie was. I'm surprised by how garbage that movie was, because I didn't think it would be the worst of. I actually kind of thought it would sort of be decent. I mean, I was not excited about the quantum realm. That looked absurd to me, and I just had no interest in that. But I thought they've got to make this one work. So, and it's only 2 hours, which shows a sort of discipline. So maybe, but no, it was garbage, which is quite similar to Fury of the Gods. Both try to raise the stakes of their particular franchise, though the comedic element is still quite apparent. This diminishes the stakes while making even the best jokes come off as grating. Now, it would seem that trying to emulate the MCU's style in terms of comedy isn't quite the foolproof formula that it once was. In the case of Shazam! Fury of the Gods, it's simply one joke too many. And yeah, and that's my basic rebuttal to this thesis. Oh, it's just too many. No, it's not. It's not too many. It's that their fourth wall breaks. And the reason that their fourth wall breaks is because the creatives who are creating these things, A, they don't like it. They don't like what they're doing. It's a paycheck. It's a way into the industry. It's a credit to their name. That's all they care about, right? And so they are forced to make these films fit this universe. And so, with a gun to their head, they are doing the best they can in one way of looking at it. And so they make fun of it because they're trying to entertain themselves as much as anyone. They don't have the confidence. Christopher Nolan, when he made Batman Begins, he only made that movie for really one reason. He was just intrigued by the idea of, like, no one's ever told the story of how Batman became Batman, and I kind of just want to see that story. How interesting would that be? And you can see that there is and he didn't make The Dark Knight until he had an idea that he thought was interesting. And you can tell that this was a creator who was invested in the work that he was creating. So this is the problem, is that when you're not invested in what you're doing, it's a big dumb joke to you. And you're kind of embarrassed that you're there. And when you're embarrassed that you're there, it comes through in what you're doing. And so normies who are sitting in this audience, or just, I would like to say, just to be charitable to our fellow moviegoers who may still be thinking that they enjoy the MCU, a lot of it is because they just want to be happy. Just like any of us. They don't want to be upset that this movie's crap. They want to have some fun, and they want to have some optimism. And when they sit down in the theater, they bring that optimism to it, and then they start to wonder, why this isn't as good. I just don't know why. So it's not. And what they're not consciously aware of is that they are being kind of made fun of for coming to this movie. They are being invited to laugh at the fact that they're watching superheroes and taking them seriously. And as a result of that, they can't take it seriously, and they begin to feel uncomfortable because they're taken out of the experience. Which brings me neatly along to our next headline. Polosurf says, I actually believe they chopped up a lot of Shazam 2. They probably did. For the Emperor says, you can have humor, but it must be when appropriate, not just shoved in everywhere. And you're exactly right. It has to be appropriate. It has to, it has to be in universe, is another way I think to put it. Because when Thor is kind of poking fun, when Iron Man is sort of poking fun at Thor for speaking in such a Shakespearean way, that's because Tony is completely the opposite personality. He doesn't take anything seriously. So for him to not take Thor seriously or to poke fun at him fits his character. Just as in that first Avengers movie, it fit Thor's character that he often was being overly dramatic about things, but he would kind of figure out how to navigate this human world, But, he was taken seriously in that film. Thor was serious, and he was also taken seriously in that first Avengers film. Because, yes, he was a bit silly from our perspective, but also he had wisdom. Thor was this extra worldly traveler who knew things that humans didn't, and that also came through. So you can have the humor, but it has to fit the characters and it has to be in the world. And Starfury says the writers producers are creatively and morally bankrupt, and as you say, have zero investment in the source material. And then also Starfury had said, excuses, excuses. They can never admit they are wrong and have no idea what they are doing. Well, they definitely can never admit they're wrong. This is one thing I think I've noticed about the personalities that Hollywood attracts, but part of it's just corporate culture too, because all corporate culture is kind of like this. They can't admit wrongdoing. They just can't. They can't admit fault, and you feel it every time you call a customer service line. It's so handy to have a human being whose only job is to take the shit from the callers, because they can't change anything in the company. It's not their fault that the policy is, well, I'm sorry, that's the policy. That's the policy, sir. And that's corporate America for you. It's like, I'm just the messenger. Don't shoot me. That's how they are with these movies. They're like, oh, well, audiences are... COVID is the most dumb excuse for literally every business owner ever. Don't misunderstand. Obviously, what happened during COVID destroyed businesses and lives, but really what it was is how we reacted to it. It was how we reacted to it that destroyed lives, because these people in Hollywood got to continue working. It was small mom and shops that couldn't, but yet they love to just blame that as the reason for all their troubles. And it allows them to just avoid taking responsibility for any of the mistakes that they made in the world. So what else? F. Sandberg came out of YouTube, so he's probably very self-conscious. Who's Sandberg? Is that the guy who wrote this article? No, that's not. Help me out with Sandberg, because I don't... I don't mind humor in Thor, but I can't stand it. This from Wrangler. I don't mind humor in Thor, but I can't stand it. Would they make him look like an idiot just to shoehorn in another gag? Yeah, and it's part of it is they just keep going back to the well. They just go back and back and back. Starfury says, the corporate everywhere. It's bad. So check out this headline. Rumor. Marvel's Blade reboot delayed due to Mahershala Ali. I learned how to pronounce that today. Mahershala Ali being unhappy with the proposed script. By the way, if you have not seen True Detective Season 3 with Mahershala Ali, the Season 2 was garbage. He was great, and I love Season 3, True Detective. Really, he crushed it. So this is actually a great actor, and I'm not surprised at what we find out in this article. This from Bounding Into Comics. In the latest update on the little film that continually tries to ice skate uphill, word on the street suggests that the delay of any news regarding Marvel's Blade reboot is the result of star Mahershala Ali's dissatisfaction with the film's script. The jig is up, folks. The talent is starting to figure this out. The supposed reason behind the Daywalker's inability to rise from the grave, well, that was a very clever turn of phrase, was first revealed by noted film reporter Jeff Snyder on the March 9th episode of his and film critic John Roca's The Hot Mic podcast. During the course of a discussion regarding the supposed fact that the Marvel's constant delays are the result of star Brie Larson's on-set diva behavior, Snyder explained to his co-host that she thinks of the Marvels as this is her movie, which that's hilarious. Boy, she must be so much fun to work with. The HR department must be very busy with Brie Larson's requests. Having broached the topic of Oscar winners turned Marvel leads, Snyder then noted, you know who else had a Marvel movie built around them before anything came into place? That would be two-time Oscar winner Mahershala Ali. With Blade, it got a new director in November. Here we are 5 months later, still no update on casting. See where I'm going with this stuff? He asked rhetorically of Roca. Brie Larson is an Oscar winner. Mahershala Ali, a two-time Oscar winner. These people want things done a certain way, and they carry the weight to get their way. And yet, sometimes this causes delays. However, despite the implied nightmare of working on such ever changing productions, Snyder opined of the actors' respective demands. Maybe this is for the best, right? Maybe at the end of the day, Brie Larson being difficult or Mahershala Ali wanting script changes all the time, maybe at the end of the day, this benefits it. And you know what? If I'm being a bit charitable to Brie Larson, um, in her defense, that's right. I'm about to mount a defense for Brie Larson. In her defense, she is working with crap and she's been completely sidelined as she was the character. She was, this is the thing. Captain Marvel comes out and we got the full court press on how this is the most feminist, female empowerment superhero movie of all time, and this is the best thing for little girls everywhere. So guess who else was hearing that message? Brie Larson. Brie Larson was being told all of this because, she was being told that Brie Larson does what Brie Larson does because Brie Larson is Brie Larson. And so can she really not be forgiven for having something of an expectation that she's important and that her role is important and that she should be the title character? I submit to you, my dear sailors and starnauts, love her or hate her, she has something of a case. And on that point, Mahershala Ali is wanting script changes. Let's see, why did this is what they say in the article. Because, and I think this is clear in the final product, who could argue with me? Kevin Feige is worn thin. Okay, I see what he's saying. He's saying, who could argue with me? Kevin Feige is worn thin. Okay, he's putting out fires on Blade, putting out fires all over the place. Yeah, so anyway, this is the juicy bit. So Snyder summarized. Mahershala Ali feels like Blade is his movie, as this is me, and you are going to build it around me, rather than this is what we are doing, and now we're going to find an actor to fit it. Bingo, the jig is up. This is exactly my entire point, right? Mahershala is not going to just sit around and wind up in this big crap fest, spending all of his time in a volume, getting noted to death, doing constant reshoots, working extra long hours, and then at the end of the day, for all of his hard work, being treated to a garbage movie that fails, bombs, gets terrible reviews, and he gets memed all over the internet for being in just a crap movie. And he doesn't want to do it. He's not going to have it. He's not having it. Brie is not having it. And you know who else is not having it? Ben Affleck is not having it. Ben Affleck, this also from Bounding into Comics, absolutely buries working on Joss Whedon's Justice League. And I quote, "That was the worst experience I've seen in a business." So I'm just going to kind of skip to Affleck's quotes here because I just thought these were super interesting. So he's giving this interview with the Hollywood Reporter. In fact, I'm just going to go to that one because I don't want to do that whole article. This is the original article, and I just want to get to kind of when he gets into it, right? Where is it? These articles are always so long. I think it's towards the end here. Okay, I got it. Hang on. This is the thing. They're not just going to sign on to these talented writers, these talented directors. They're not just going to keep doing these garbage products for no reason. Why is my Control F not working? Oh, that's so embarrassing. I literally am trying to Control F an article and I can't. I'm not a boomer. I'm Gen X. I think. I think I'm a millennial, but I don't know. I don't really know how you actually figure that out. Maybe this isn't the right article. All right, screw it. I'll just go back to the original article. Basically, he's talking about working with Zack Snyder and how he was on Justice League and the whole thing got pulled out from under him. Where is it? Okay, so Affleck says, yeah, I did finally figure out how to play that character Batman, and I nailed it in The Flash. For the 5 minutes I'm there, it's really great. A lot of it's just tone. You've got to figure it out. What's your version of the person? Who is the guy that fits what you can do? I tried to fit myself into Batman, he said. Affleck liked a lot of the stuff he did in Batman v Superman, but working with Zack Snyder made it palatable. When Snyder bowed out of Justice League, it became a teachable seminar on all the reasons why this is how not to do it. From production to bad decisions to horrible personal tragedy, and just ending with the most monstrous taste in my mouth. And then Affleck goes on to say the silver lining came in the form of the Snyder Cut. He says, Zack Snyder eventually went to AT&T and was like, look, I can get you 4 hours of content for HBO Max. He was like, do you want to shoot in my backyard? So though Affleck was worried about, trying it again, he said, yeah, he still went ahead and did it. And the finished product, Zack Snyder's Justice League, which I actually quite enjoyed, by the way. Let me know in the chat what you thought of Snyder's cut if you watched it. Went on and became the highest rated movie on IMDb of Affleck's career. Asked if intense Snyder fans had anything to do with that, Affleck countered, say what you want. I've never had one movie that went from nadir to pinnacle. Retroactively, it's a hit. All of a sudden, I was getting congratulated for the bomb I'm in. The Bomb, the studio's cut of Justice League, cost him a shot at directing The Batman, among other slights that disheartened Affleck professionally. Affleck said, it made me go, I'm out. I never want to do any of this again. I'm not suited. That was the worst experience I've ever seen in business, full of some shitty experiences. It broke my heart. There was an idea of someone, meaning Joss Whedon, coming in like, I'll rescue you and we'll do 60 days of shooting and I'll write a whole thing around what you have. I've got the secret. And it wasn't the secret. That was hard. And I started to drink too much. It was either that or jump out the window. Miserable, missing his family, and dissatisfied with acting in rubber suits against a green screen, Affleck started to reevaluate his life. You want to go to work and find something interesting to hang on to, he thought. I don't want to participate in this in any way, and I don't want to squander any more of my life, of which I have a limited amount. Whoa. Ben Affleck dropping some bombs there. And, to be fair, some of that was circumstance, right? Snyder having to bow out because of a tragedy and so forth. But, I mean, you get the point. It's like, this is an investment of your creative life, and is it worth it? So more on this subject in just a moment. I'm going to take a short break, and I will be right back. Okay, and we are back. Thank you, my dear sailors and star nuts. I have human limitations. So, what is next in your dear captain stack of stuff? Because we this brings me, okay, yeah. So, on the subject of these actors, these writers, these directors, they're starting to figure out that this stuff is garbage and they don't want any part of it. And so we're getting a brain drain, and these movies are getting worse. They're getting worse and worse and worse. And I just happened upon a video by George the Giant Slayer. Hail George! How do they always say it? George! George! Okay. I'm going to play a little bit of this video. And I put the link in the description to George's full video. Please do check it out and give him a like and a subscribe if you haven't. He's got a great channel. Checking in with the chat real quick before I show you this. Star Fury says, what a truckload of money can't make actors work on a pile of garbage. I am truly shocked. Haven't they already sold their soul to Hollyweird? I mean, look, I think that people creatives, there is an investment of your time in your career, and I wish I could write 50 novels that I have in my head, but I only have so much time. And it sucks, because in a way, you can build a business in a certain sense. You can test a product, and if a product doesn't work, you can try another product. But with artistic pursuits, I feel like it's a little different, because you kind of can never know whether it's going to be successful or not. You just have to do your best and put it out there and learn what you can on the next one. And kind of making YouTube videos, as I'm discovering, is very much like that. It's like you kind of just have to learn a little bit at a time, and sometimes you think you've got a winner and sometimes you don't. And I can sympathize with people who are like, I don't want to give 2 years of my life to something that's going to turn into just more garbage going through the system. So I don't know. I'm no special pleader for Hollywood actors. I'm just saying I can understand being in the position of like, what am I going to spend my time on? For the Emperor says, TikTok, TikTok, TikTok. Don't rush me. Don't rush me, for the Emperor. The Emperor waits for no man. Wrangler says, I have to hit the rack. You all have a great night. Well, thank you for coming into the stream, Wrangler. Sleep tight. Have a great night, as For the Emperor points out. George! All right, let's check out what George had to say. Okay. Let me know in the chat if you can hear that okay. Hang on, let me pause it 1 second. Fixing some things. I have in the works a new system I'm going to be using eventually, so this should be much more seamless in the future. Oh shoot, there was no audio. Sorry, that was my fault. Let me fix it. All right, I got it.
Such a natural way. I think he updates it in such a natural way, in a way that feels like it adds to the canon of Peter Pan, and also subtly corrects kind of the stereotypes that are unfortunately passed along through those fairy tales, correcting the indigenous representation that was mistaken in the animated and in some of the past versions.
I loathe liars. That's why I like calling them out, especially future OnlyFans candidates who don't have any talent skills except to peddle their propaganda.
You Lost Boys.
Every last one of us.
But you're not all boys. So?
Every last one of us.
Disney actually had the audacity to hire rejects who didn't even read the book. And then they upped the ante by corrupting the canon and filling in the ranks of the Lost Boys with girls. But where do you live mostly now? We're the Lost Boys. Who are they? They are the children who fall out of their perambulators when the nurse is looking the other way. If they're not claimed in 7 days, they're sent far away to Neverland to defray expenses. Oh, what fun it must be. Yes, said cunning Peter, but we are rather lonely. You see, we have no female companionship. And none of the others girls? Oh, no. Girls, you know, are much too clever to fall out of their prams.
See, it's like, this is brilliant because he is armed with facts. For the Emperor says, okay, so we fixed the volume. Is she serious? Absolutely. Like, this is the thing. We can't. This is why there was a author who recently got memed and her video went viral on the internet because she was asked in a book interview in like the mainstream media. She was asked, define wokeness, and her whole book is about how wokeness is a problem, and she kind of froze and she couldn't define it. And I thought, see, yeah, I can identify with what the hell that is, but part of the problem is the problem is it's many things. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought the simplest way to put it is wokeness is simply the belief in using force to control what people think about things. And in specific to wokeness, it is with regard to their leftist ideologies, their current leftist ideologies, which are increasingly bizarre. And this leads them to, even as they cry about the whitewashing of history, they are literally trying to erase history. They are trying to rewrite history. And what is so absolutely insidious about that is that it's actually the opposite of what you would do if you wanted humanity to learn from its mistakes. If you wanted human beings to learn from the mistakes of the past, to erase history is the worst thing you could do. And so to listen to this idiot saying like, oh, we're updating, we're fixing all those problematic stereotypes. It's like, well, one day you're not even going to know what a problematic stereotype even is. How are you even going to know what one is? How are you even going to be able to define it? All the books will be sanitized and edited. Everything you read will be, rewritten to conform with your worldview. So how will you even know that there was ever anything wrong done in the past? And that's quite the point. That's quite the point, because then the only thing you'll need to put your attention on is whoever the party or the state or whoever you get your NPC download, whoever the enemy is supposed to be. Whoever needs to be burned at the stake next will be the only thing you need to concern yourself with. This is why it's such an evil ideology, because a true progressive ideology would be to understand history so that we don't repeat those mistakes. So they're not content to simply allow literature to exist as it was and just let it be what it was. I kind of enjoy sometimes watching old movies from the 50s and being like, oh, that's kind of the way they thought back then. It's like, we need that. We need to have those old photos of what we used to be like, just to have them. So I love that George points out exactly, he brought the exact passage in the book, which explains two things: that A, the Lost Boys were boys, and B, that's for a reason. This is the second insidious thing about what is wokeness. Wokeness is viewing all of the world through one narrow lens of your own leftist ideology and believing that any contradiction to that is, number one, a lie, number two, dangerous, and number three, a reason that you are entitled to destroy anyone and anything that you consider to be a lie or incorrect. And only an ideology that is so based on lies could require such constant management of the truth. And so the whole purpose of the Lost Boys being boys is that they are missing something. They are missing a piece of their humanity. And what is that missing piece of their humanity? Why, it's girls. Girls and boys are two halves of the same whole. And that's the whole point of the story. George goes on.
Disney's false moralizing to elevate the women at the cost of the boys only made them look dumb. The exact opposite of what the studio intended, and definitely didn't make them look clever. Thus, that one simple example in the trailer, contrasted against the canon and the animated classic, proves that any radical ideology immediately leads to the loss of individuality and imagination, which gives rise to institutional laziness inside the studio system. And that is the death knell to creativity and a guarantee of box office poison.
Once again, the idea of knowing that there was no sacrifice in story made in order to update and make a more reflective piece.
Now, the bottom line is the only films being produced today are for the short bus crowd and the Tinseltown woke or tartary. So what do you have? You had author J.M. Barrie already had elevated women on a pedestal. He wove them into the very fabric of the story as key players.
I'm certainly proud of you, you blockheads. I bring your mother to tell you stories.
Mother?
Nostalgia is a bridge to the past. Whatever we watched.
See, that's an important point, because Peter Pan, why is Peter Pan bringing Wendy? He's bringing Wendy because he's trying to solve a problem, which is the Lost Boys are starting to buckle under his leadership. He's having trouble keeping them in line. He's having trouble. He doesn't know what to do to make them happy. And he senses something is missing, and they miss their mothers, right? They need a mother figure in their life because their life is incomplete without one. And so he goes and quite erroneously assumes that just any girl will do. But then it actually turns out he picks the one girl that was the perfect girl to bring, because she naturally is kind of wise and has a maternal energy to her. And she's able to kind of, bring some culture and some civilization to them. If the woke could ever just shut up for 10 seconds and listen to what someone else has to say about something, they might actually be able to hear the message of the original Peter Pan fable. They might actually be able to hear the point that women are important and have important leadership abilities. They have a maternal leadership quality that boys lack, is the whole point of the story. And so there can be two halves of the same whole without either half diminishing the other. But they're not capable of hearing that because they're evangelists. They are pushing their secular, insane religion, and they don't have time for things like facts or listening.
Read a long time ago. It's how we create an emotional, sentimental connection to it. And Hollywood wants to tap right into that and turn it into a cash cow. So I'm like, if you want to do that, then honor the canon and faithfully adapt the material. At least make it better. But definitely don't sling mud at people's memories. You want to create something, make it better, make it new, so it can sit on a space on the shelf in your mental library right next to everything else you fondly remember. Otherwise, all these bully pulpit productions, the only thing they deserve is backlash.
But these people are virtue signaling. They're trying to bring people down to raise their own status. And they say it's because, no, we're protecting minorities.
And all these people that Disney bellyaches about, calling them bad, where are they? Because every time I look around at some of these trailers, all I see are positive reaction numbers, except for the ones that are bad. Take Moana, for example. You got 168,000 likes versus 10,000 dislikes. Or Encanto even. 301,000 likes versus 8,500 dislikes. We can go on. Raya the Last Dragon and Mulan, it's the same story over and over. Whether some of these were box office champs or financial flops, all of them had non-white leads with a non-Western canon story. So what's the answer then when you compare that to Peter Pan and Wendy? It had about 45,000 likes and 418,000 dislikes. So what happened? Oof. Did all the ists and phobes take the day off for the other trailers and then come out in force for this farce? See, this isn't about racism. This is a reality check, calling down the mouse house's lies. So let's flip the script for a moment. Let's play their game. Why do we gender swap, Nancy Drew to Nathaniel Drew? What do you think? They'd blow their stack? Or how about we take the Woman King that everybody lionized in Hollywood from Deadline to the Vanity Fair? And we actually tell the truth about the story, not the legend that they're trying to build out of all these heroes. It was a tribe of warriors and slavers who oppressed the African people. What if we took Black Panther and gave him a biracial parent so he came out born lily white? I guarantee you the boycotts would be 24/7 on every major news network.
George, go check out George the Giant Slayer. He has that. The rest of that video is excellent. So I linked that in the description. Yeah, this is the point, right? This is why is it that when they actually make original characters that are non-white characters, they actually have more success? You have Moana and you have Encanto that honored the cultural roots of those stories because they told a new story. They weren't telling a tokenized story. So on the subject of tokenization, let's see what updates have been made in the world of Magic the Gathering. Okay, so I just want to take you online to the online store. And I just found this little gem is on sale now. Aragorn and Arwen from the Magic the Gathering Universes Beyond, The Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth, and you may notice something different about Aragorn. Yes, he has been 100% race swapped. And what did Aragorn actually look like in the books? And this is the exact quote from the book. This is Frodo's note. This is Frodo seeing Strider for the first time in the Prancing Pony, right? Suddenly, Frodo noticed that a strange-looking, weather-beaten man sitting in the shadows near the wall was also listening intently to the Hobbit talk. He had a tall tankard in front of him and was smoking a long-stemmed pipe, curiously carved. His legs were stretched out before him, showing high boots of supple leather that fitted him well, but had seen much wear and were now caked with mud. A travel-stained cloak of heavy dark green cloth was drawn about him, and in spite of the heat of the room, he wore a hood that overshadowed his face, but the gleam of his eyes could be seen as he watched the hobbits. As Frodo drew near, he threw back his hood, showing a shaggy head of dark hair flecked with gray, and in a pale, stern face, a pair of gray eyes. So, two things. Number one, how is Aragorn described in the book? Well, you just heard it thusly, my dear sailors and Starnauts. So that is from the original source material, right? We will come back. We'll come back to the headlines in a moment. Secondly, The Lord of the Rings is based upon British mythology, basically the mythology of the British Isles. It is essentially, as you all know, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, you know that Tolkien was setting out to, in a sense, recreate the lost mythologies of the ancestors of the British Isles. And so this is my point. In a time where we are absolutely obsessed with everyone's cultural identity, we are absolutely obsessed with everyone's racial heritage, we are absolutely obsessed with everyone's identity and how they identify and their lived experience, why is it that there is only one group of people, just one, that are not allowed to have a cultural history? They are not allowed to have a cultural heritage that's celebrated, and that is people descended from European peoples, because the idea of labeling everyone white and black is absurd, because the reality is humanity is a tapestry of thousands of different heritages across thousands of years of cultural travel and exchange. And so to say that one white person's history is the same as another's is ridiculous. I myself am the descendant of Portuguese, Spanish, and Irish. So to the extent that I have a stake in any cultural heritage, it would be in Portuguese and Spanish heritage. It would be in Irish heritage. And why am I not allowed to have that? Why am I not allowed to have any kind of folklore that is of my people? My people are Americans, so I don't even really think of it in those terms. But I'm making a point here, which is, am I not allowed to have that cultural heritage because of the color of my skin? And I'm not saying that, I'm not the victim here, but no one's a victim in this situation. Everybody has a cultural heritage, and everyone should be allowed to have it. So this is a ridiculous attitude that The Lord of the Rings, it has to be changed. It has to be updated for a modern audience. And I could explain to you what tokenization is and why it's so wrong, but I actually have a man who is much better suited to this task, and his name is Eric July, also known as the Young Ripper. So I will just let him fill you in.
I promised I wouldn't break down today, and I'm trying not to, but the one thing I didn't get to say about this is we've seen Baranor in the Shadow of War video games, but he was a made-up character for the Lord of the Rings, and I've never seen myself represented in the Lord of the Rings before, so...
Oh, God. Oh, no. So... Oh. By the way, the guy on the left is Eric July, for those who don't know. Not the guy on the right.
Here. Okay, let's talk about that. Yeah, it's interesting that this is a fully adult man that talking about never being represented in the Lord of the Rings, okay? When I talk about people that only see legitimacy in white characters and people that only, this is the types of people that I'm talking about, okay? That they, for whatever reason, make themselves shallow, okay? Because they don't have, I guess, anything else interesting about them as opposed to their skin tone. But they are so shallow and they feel like everybody else is, and they limit what their relatability to be is limited to their color. I talk about this with Shazaam, and of course, there's obviously white people that are already fans and supporters of his the first book and the character and being intrigued by him. I don't want people to feel like that. The only way that you can see this person in terms of feeling some level of relatability is by way of skin tone. That's absolutely nonsensical. That means that I have failed as a writer. That means that I have failed as a creative.
100%.
If you can't get something out of this at all, aside from, well, this person shares a skin tone that's similar to you. He's shedding real tears, bros.
This is awesome, because I've never seen myself as one of the main characters before. Like, actually...
Oh, God. I cannot stand this representation thing. This is one of the worst parts of this timeline. I was literally sitting across the table from someone at a writer's group who, really nice guy, but, he had to just make representation is important. I'm like, what are you talking about? This, let me show you something. Let me switch my stream here. Right there. Look at that beauty. That would be Shazaam #1, written by Eric July, of course. And it wasn't enough to have one signed cover. I actually had to have the collector's edition also signed. That's my favorite cover. Isn't that a beaut? And then... Yes. Beautiful. My point is, so I read these books, right? I was so excited to order Shazaam when he wrote these, because it's been so long since there's been anything new in comics. There's been anything that I've been following. Of course, now I'm starting to discover Graham Nolan's work and everything. So, there's a whole world of Iron Age creators out there. And can you imagine if I got this book, right? I start reading. I'm like, well, it could be pretty good. It could be pretty good. The only problem is the main character's a black guy, and I'm not black, so I just don't feel represented, and I just don't understand. I just don't feel like he can relate to my cultural lived experience. And it's just, I guess it's a good story, but I guess I'm just the wrong race to enjoy this story. Could you imagine? I couldn't enjoy probably 3/4 of any of the films or books I've ever read. I couldn't. How could I identify with, okay, here's one, and somewhat topical. One of my most favorite characters in a movie was Apollo Creed Apollo Creed in the Rocky films and how he starts out as a rival and he ultimately becomes Rocky's friend who brings him back from the brink of ruin by training him and has this heroic, fatal duel with Ivan Drago. I mean, this is a great story. This is an absolutely excellent story. And can you imagine if I'm not able to identify with that character? So when they're talking about representation, what they're really saying is that we need to rewrite everything so that what I think was wrong in the past can be right now. And that is a miserable way to live. Eric goes on.
See myself represented in some form of like official Lord of the Rings media, so that's representation matters. Lord of the Rings has been my favorite for the longest.
Okay, see, that's self-defeating, homie, and I'm just telling this to you, like just giving it to you straight. That is a self-defeating point. See, what it sounds like has happened is that be it big media entities or big like when you consider like the narratives that have gone around, they've really hyper-emphasized diversity, inclusivity, and representation, and you have unfortunately fallen for that gimmick, right? To where you feel like now you've had this emotional tie to this, and now you're saying, oh, I've never felt represented, and you just haven't said that you've been a fan. What was the problem, dude?
I don't think they understand how important this is.
It might be important.
Can you imagine that this is how grown men are acting on the internet? This is absurd. Like, this is absolutely, you know what? I'm going to make a video where I watch Titanic and I cry at the end. And I'm just, no. Okay, what's a movie I legit cried at? I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to be very honest with you. What is a movie I legit cried at recently? I can't really think of one, but I'm sure there's been one. Actually, okay, I actually got kind of emotional on a Picard episode recently because it was, you know what it was? It was the moment where Picard is sitting at the bar. I want to say it's in like season 3, episode 2 or 3. I think it's episode 3. And Riker and him are talking about the birth of his son, and Picard's just congratulating him, and then Riker walks away, and he's like, yeah, I gotta go, Jean-Luc, gotta get back to the family. And then there's just this minute where Picard's just got this look on his face. Like, you can just see that he's so alone, and he's like, he's got these regrets, and I don't know, it just hit me where it hurt, Now imagine if I just, oh crap, grab the camera. Okay, I just watched episode 3 of Picard. You just need to understand how important this is. Oh my God. This is not the way a man behaves. This is ridiculous. And it further illustrates that, I mean, imagine the sheer desperation you must feel in your life that you have to run to the internet, show everyone that you're crying. And this is the thing. In a rational world, everyone would find this hilarious, but we all have a proverbial gun to our heads. And that gun to our heads is the woke cancel mob. We all have this gun. I have this gun to my head right now, and I just don't care. They're going to have to shoot me. So, to shut me up. But they have this gun to our heads, and what this gun fires is getting you fired, ruining your life, harassing you online, death threats, bullying, all these sorts of things. And it doesn't affect all of us. Mostly, I think it affects higher profile people because they can be made examples of. But everyone feels the pressure. And if it were not for that gun to our heads, this performance would be absurd. This would be laughable. This would not be considered healthy behavior from an adult man. But because this is tied up in all the insanity of identity politics, well, now we need to pour our hearts out for this poor soul who spent his whole life being a ardent, diehard fan of an English work of literature about English mythology, and only now that it has been completely bastardized and it has been culturally appropriated. Now that it has been culturally appropriated, so that it reflects more the worldview that he would like it, not even a worldview, that it reflects what he would like it to reflect. Now he must cry in celebration on the internet. It's pathetic. This is self-humiliating, and I feel bad for this guy because the internet is forever, man.
But it's a learned trait, and it's important in the sense of it's artificial. Because let me say, I'm probably looking.
For the Emperor says, bye, I'm gonna go. Have a good night. You too, for the Emperor. Thanks for joining me.
Darker than you are, and this doesn't make me feel any kind of way. I know it's a tokenization, and yeah, we can talk about the sloppy seconds and all of that sort of stuff where, again, y'all only see legitimacy in white characters anyway, and how silly and goofy that is. But I don't feel any kind of way about this other than I think it's stupid.
Well said. So yeah, this is the worst timeline. This is the world we live in. Okay, try this headline. I'm going to bring us to a close with what I consider my closing argument, in the argument that the jig is up in Hollywood. The talent is beginning to figure out what the game is, and it's really audiences who are becoming red-pilled to this as well. They may not be able to articulate it, but they're beginning to sense what's going on. And what's going on is the people that are making all of these films, these superhero films, these fantasy films, they hate this material. They hate what they're doing, and they don't much care for the people that they're making these things for. And I give you, case in point, Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. I did a whole video about how I consider this movie to literally be making fun of Dungeons and Dragons. And this was purely on my reaction to the trailer. This was nothing more than I watched both trailers, and this was my honest to God reaction. This is nerd face. They're not actually adapting the fantasy world. They are adapting the gameplay, right? That is, they are adapting a group of players sitting at a game and memeing on it. And so they're not really taking it seriously. And the actual fantasy world is just a skin that they're putting over it. And it's why the whole thing is so laughable. Like, you watch this trailer, and serious question, because I look at the ratio on this thing. Okay, this is an Old Spice commercial for Dungeons and Dragons, and it's got like 730 likes. And there's people saying things like Old Spice is now canon. Next session, I'm going to send my character to the market to pick some up. Old Spice? This is for product placement. And I start to lose faith in humanity. So that brings me neatly along to this article. Building Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. How Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daly brought the ultimate nerd property to movie theaters. It's so interesting, as you read this article, to kind of hear how they speak of Dungeons and Dragons and what they consider to be nerds, right? Some partnerships are forged in the heat of battle. John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein's was built geeking out over home movies. I'm going to skip a lot of this because it just talks about how they work together on Freaks and Geeks and whatever. Let's see here. For years, D&D was seen as the exclusive domain of nerds. And a poorly received... What's wrong with that, by the way? Why can't it just stay there? Why is it necessary for it to go beyond the domain of nerds? I'm not saying people aren't welcome to join, but I'm saying what is this obsession now in modern corporate entertainment that anything that was in the domain of nerds must now we have to get it out of there. We have to bring it to the mainstream. It doesn't have to. For years, D&D was seen as the exclusive domain of nerds, and a poorly received movie adaptation from 2000 starring Jeremy Irons didn't help matters. Yeah, it was pretty dopey. But thanks to appearances on Stranger Things and the web series Critical Role, as well as famous players like Joe Manganiello, and D&D has enjoyed a major cultural resurgence. Still, adapting the game into a feature film was far from a simple prospect. Passing through the hands of several directors and screenwriters before landing on Goldstein and Daly's desk in 2019, their gently irreverent approach, tweaking the tropes of fantasy storytelling without outright spoofing it. Oh, is it without outright spoofing it? Won over a sterling cast, including Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, Regé-Jean Page, and total D&D neophyte Hugh Grant. Now, pay attention to this piece. I had low expectations, Grant says. I hate all scripts, pretty much, and I found myself amused and quite touched. I didn't want to put it down. It's incredibly accessible to the non-D&Der. I hope, he adds with an exclamation point. So notice this. Hugh Grant is saying, oh, I love the script, and it's very accessible to the non-D&Der. I mean, I hope. Christ, if it isn't, we're sunk. Meaning if normies don't like it, we're sunk, which there's some truth to that. I mean, I don't think you have to know what an owlbear is to enjoy an owlbear. With Honor Among Thieves set to open the South by Southwest Film Festival on March 10th, it debuts on March 31st, Goldstein 54, Daly 37 are also leveling up their career, launching their Gold Day production company. Don't care. Have huge ambition. Don't care. Talk about their relationship. Okay, this is where we get to the juicy bit. So the interviewer says, you tend to take on projects that have been bouncing around town. Daly says, has a stink on them? Yeah, and then they get made. What do you think you're doing here? What do you think you're doing there? Goldstein says, the reason projects languish is often because they check certain boxes that executives thought they needed, but they're not different or surprising in a way that actors who read it will respond to. Ultimately, the biggest hurdle of getting a movie made is getting the casting where a studio is going to greenlight it. We've been able to write or rewrite scripts in ways that actors want to jump into it. It's taking a character that you've seen before and giving it a twist that makes it odd or unexpected. The interviewer asks, what do you remember about playing Dungeons & Dragons for the first time? Daly says, my first memory was on the set of Freaks and Geeks. Oh, so his experience playing Dungeons & Dragons was when he was cast on Freaks and Geeks. I remember even then, wanted to be a filmmaker, how much access it gave you to that creative spark that comes with filmmaking. And then prior to the pandemic, a friend wanted to dungeon master a campaign, and I agreed to be a part of it. We played for 4.5 years, leading into and then through the pandemic. Ultimately, working on the movie is what stopped the campaign. It was so much fun. Goldstein says, I came to it pretty young, and it was really my older brother who was leading the charge. This is probably 82. I was like 12. I was fascinated by the idea you made your own game. I'd never seen anything like that before. Well, that's not bad. Oh, okay. He understands it, right? When you were first considering making this movie, did you think back to that experience as a kid? Goldstein says, it wasn't so much that. It was seeing the potential to bring what we had brought to small and medium-sized movies to a much bigger canvas. We didn't want to do a straightforward fantasy epic drama. Nor did we want to do a spoof or something where the comedy was the lead of it. Really? Watch that trailer and tell me if that's what they made. We wanted to do a movie that was true to the spirit of the game, would appeal to the fans, but could also stand on its own. Daly adds, a lot of the world has already been built. You have all these books that you can use as references and creatures and monsters that are unique to D&D and no other fantasy piece of IP. To be able to embrace the absurdity and the oddity of some of these creatures and spells allowed us to make the thing that we felt very much aligned with our sensibility. Goldstein. John mentioned Monty Python. That's not quite the tone, but what those guys did very successfully was make intelligent absurdity. To shine a light on the ridiculousness of medieval cliches. We're trying to do that with the fantasy genre. The interviewer asks, Dungeons & Dragons has been one of the urtex of geekery for the past 50 years, so why do you think it's been so hard to adapt it into a successful movie? Daly says, sometimes people take it too seriously, and they want to embrace the more dramatic elements of it. To us, that's ridiculous, because you've got to literally He's trying to say, you've literally got brains with 4 legs. You know, creatures that were so obviously written with a wink. On the flip side, if you try to get too goofy with it, you're also doing it a disservice. Goldstein says, what we learned doing Spider-Man Homecoming was that while you have to have a certain reverence for and love of the source material, you can't let the weight of that thing hinder your creativity. Hey, Tom. How's it going? Tom in the chat. And for anyone just joining, I am reading an interview with, I'll get their full names, Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daly. These are the writers for Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. And this is, I'm going a bit long on this, but the reason why is, it's very important what they're saying here, because let me just pick up where I left off. Goldstein says it never left us with this one. We had people looking over our shoulder from the brand, from the studio, even on set. We had advertisers who said, well, she has something to say. Well, she has something to say if she's going to do the spell, because the spell has a verbal component. The good thing about working with D&D specifically is it's not like we're bound by the characters or pre-existing stories. We made up almost all the characters that are in here, which is fine. There are, you're not ruining any source material there. The interviewer says, that's the wrinkle about D&D, though. How do you convey the spirit of the game when there are no set characters or story to draw from? Daly says it's a combination of things. Each character represents a different player and how they go about playing the game. Bingo. It's like before, I was dead on about this. They're not adapting the fantasy story of Dungeons and Dragons. They're not attempting, and to be fair, of course, there isn't like I'm sure there must be novels I don't follow the extended universe of Dungeons and Dragons very much, but there has to be D&D novels, isn't there? But they're saying, look, there's no established canon in terms of characters, so we're free to make our own. But what do they choose to do? They choose to make the characters as though they're players, not characters in the world, players. So Daly says Zank, or Zhank, or whatever the hell his name is, played by Reggae Jean Page, is very much the nerdy player that doesn't make jokes and adheres strictly to the rule book. Whereas Edgen, Chris Pine's character, is more the casual player. He doesn't bother to learn about the bardic spells and would prefer to just hit people over the head with his lute. Oh, jeez. Goldstein says, the movie is almost like the Dungeon Master. The plot twists that we throw at our characters are what a DM would do at the table, just to screw with you and make it more fun. It was our way of capturing what goes on when you're playing D&D without breaking the fourth wall or becoming meta with it. I don't know about anyone else who dungeon masters a game, but when I'm dungeon mastering a game, I try and make it like a movie for the characters. Like my goal is not to just be, I'm going to throw you this wacky curveball and that wacky curveball. I mean, I do, because you have to, but my goal is I want it to feel like they're characters in their own movie. A movie that's taken seriously, by the way. They talk about where the subtitle comes from. Don't care about that. Don't care about that. Okay, here the interviewer asked this piece. To be able to do the kind of storytelling at the level you want to do it, do you feel you have to find a way into a franchise versus writing an original story? And here, my dear sailors and starnauts, the whole thesis of this live stream comes full circle. We began by telling you about how Shazaam is a failure because it's being joked to death. Everything is a big dumb joke. We discussed how the Blade actor Mahershala Ali is causing problems because the script is BS and it's not built around him and he doesn't want to do it. We talked about how Ben Affleck has had it with DC and he has no interest in giving any more of his life or his time to this career because the reality is the jig is up. We talked about The Mandalorian and how the whole thing that began promisingly has now been reduced to it is the Bo-Katan vehicle and the Baby Yoda merchandising monetization strategy. That is what The Mandalorian is. And what do all these things have in common? They have exactly this in common. Goldstein answers, using existing IP certainly greases the wheels. Any meeting we have with a studio head starts with, here's 4 things we own. Got any interest? To some extent, I think we use intellectual property as a bit of a costume to get ourselves in the door. We're still going to make the movie that we want to make. It just makes it all a bit easier to get it going if it has something that people are very familiar with. In other words, we fake our interest in an IP so that we can wear it as a skin to disregard everything about it and just make the movie we want to make. Because that's the game you have to play in Hollywood. To quote Goldstein, that's how you grease the wheels. The interviewer goes on to ask, when you announced your new company, you talked about taking viewers on a journey they hadn't been on before, but that seems at odds with franchise filmmaking. Daly says that's what we hate about franchise films, honestly. Goldstein says, we're not going to turn our backs on tentpoles, but we won't deliver the tentpole you've seen 20 times before because that's anathema to us. We will only do it if we can give you something fresh. The interviewer says, in that vein, I was really struck in Honor Among Thieves that the lead female characters, Michelle Rodriguez's Holga and Sophia Lillis's Doric, are at the forefront of the action scenes, girl boss, and the men are often hanging back. You're really? You were struck by that? That's not like every single movie and TV show now ever. That's not like the whole feminist agenda is being vomited over every single script. And really, you were struck by this? Of course you were struck by this because, you know, all the cultists want is to see their cult reaffirmed at every opportunity. And so every single movie is an opportunity for their cult-like devotion to this ideology that men must be emasculated and women must be artificially inflated. They must see it affirmed, and every time it's affirmed, they get excited all again. And so Goldstein says that was not an attempt at wokeness on our part. Daly says, swear to God, it wasn't. We liked that Holga is the bruiser that does the dirty work for Edgen, and he doesn't like to get his hands dirty. We also love emasculating leading men. Goldstein says, not for woke reasons. Daly says, just because it's funny and fun and fresh. It was the dynamic we had with Rachel McAdams and Jason Bateman's characters in Game Night. Goldstein says, or Tom Holland versus Robert Downey Jr. in Spider-Man. We like our male heroes to be challenged and not simply heroic. See, look at how they're conflating these two concepts, right? They're conflating the concept of challenging a character and making him earn his heroism and his leadership in the story with emasculating the character and making him a big dumb idiot and making him, you know, bitched around by the women the whole movie, right? I would say an example of what they claim they're shooting for, but that was done well, would be James Gunn's first Guardians of the Galaxy. Peter Quill is a great example of this. His character is just flat out that he is the fool triumphant. That is his character. That is his archetype. He is kind of a fool, but he's got a heart of gold and he's trying his best. And sometimes he screws up and sometimes he gets lucky, but he never gives up. And that's actually a pretty good angle for his character. And throughout the film, some of his plans work. They work really well. Sometimes he's very generous and selfless, and other times he's very selfish. And occasionally, you know, the women give him crap because he deserves it. And it's funny and it's hilarious. But by the end of the film, he earns his place as a leader. He proves to be a leader through good decision making. And he actually risks his life to save Gamora at one point and earns her respect. And he earns her trust. And by the end of the movie, he's a hero. That's how you challenge a hero who is male. That's also, by the way, how you challenge a female hero. It's really no different for either gender. It's the same thing. For a hero to be an authentic hero, they must be challenged. This is not what you're doing, Dale and Goldstein. What you're doing is conflating good storytelling with not woke storytelling. You know, going back to that question, what is wokeness? Wokeness is a lie. Wokeness is a lie. This is not reality. This is not how real people behave. So we're going to make movies where we force people like marionettes to behave as we envision the world in the utopian vision that we have of the world. This is how people would behave. And so we just force it onto fictional works, but it doesn't exist in the real world. So they say this is not woke, but this is not how you challenge male heroes. So they're intentionally or unintentionally, they're liars. They're in the woke cesspit and they don't know it. Daly says, what's funny is that in our casting process on multiple films, we've met movie stars that you would think are comfortable enough in their own skin that they would be able to portray themselves in a vulnerable light. But a lot of them really don't feel comfortable doing that. Obviously, we won't name a name here, but we'd love it. We'd love to sick the Twitter mob on them. But there is a notable movie star, Goldstein says, I can think of two. And Daly says, who is so handsome and awesome that he will not make himself look weak. Well, whoever he and the other one are, good for them. Good for these two actors that they are not naming, because they probably were like, you wrote me to be a bitch-ass pussy in this movie, and I'm not going to do it. And they're like, oh, well, somebody doesn't want to be vulnerable. It's like, you're confusing. You know what you are? You're a couple of milquetoast soy boys who are confusing being a man and being comfortable with being vulnerable with being a bitch. That's what you're confusing. And being emasculated, being made fun of, and being lampooned, when that is not the proper, if that's not the character, unless you are literally playing the fool triumphant character, you should reject that. You should absolutely reject it. Or just the fool. Maybe you're just the fool. You know, it's like Mahershala Ali. He could easily be one of these guys they're referring to. He's reading the script for Blade, right? I think I missed this part in the Mahershala story. Yeah, it's right at the end of the story here. Just real quickly. Quick little departure. I'm interrupting. Okay. This is what they're building up to, right? Blade, the hunter, his daughter, right? According to a supposed leak of the film script, not only will Blade see the Daywalker underutilized in his own film, but he will end his supposed solo outing by passing the torch on to his daughter, Alex. I could pretty much stake my life that is true, because that is what Mahershala Ali is like. The movie is called Blade, and you are casting me to play Blade. I am not going along with some bullshit script where my only purpose is to be a bait and switch for whatever girl boss you want to shoehorn into the next movie. It's, there's nothing at all wrong with him, the main character, having a successor who might have spin-offs, but the reality is this actor is drawing a line, and so are the actors that Goldstein and Daly are referring to. And he just doesn't want to be vulnerable. He just doesn't want to, some men are not comfortable just being vulnerable. Goldstein says, I think they think they love to do that, but when it comes down to it, meaning be vulnerable, they're not really willing to look foolish or, quote, less than. Daly said, we've talked about this before with Chris Pine. What we love about Chris is that he's hyper aware of that. And he wants to make himself look as bad as possible, almost to a fault. Sometimes we're like, all right, no, you have to be a hero in this moment. Well, Chris Pine, you are a bitch-ass pussy. You really are. Unbelievable. Chris Pine, he's perfect. He is perfect for this movie. He is absolutely perfect for it. He is a total fool. He looks like an idiot in every single scene. He doesn't even look like he belongs in this world. And by the way, he is an impression of a nerd. He is an impression of someone who plays the game Dungeons & Dragons. So if you are excited for this movie, if you go to this movie and you sit in this theater, because I honestly can't tell. I cannot read the temperature on this one. It seems like people are excited for this movie that I see interacting online. So I have no idea. But I will just say this. If you sit down at this movie and you have a good time, they're making fun of you. They're making fun of you. That's the whole purpose of this movie. They think you're stupid, and they don't want to have a male character be portrayed in any kind of positive light because they are hack, talentless writers who think that that's what makes a character interesting. It would make sense. Joss Whedon, in the hands of Joss Whedon, I bet this could be a good movie because he would have a balance of characters. There would be a fool, there would be a hero, there would be a girl boss who actually earns it, And then maybe there would be the timid princess who's dainty and likes girly things. The point is there would be a cross section of different personalities. Go watch Firefly for examples of this. You know, oh my God, why am I? Nathan Fillion. I almost drew a blank on his name. Nathan Fillion, you know, he plays a very funny, happy-go-lucky kind of character, but he's also deadly serious at times and lethal. And he's a leader. And make no mistake about it, yes, you know, the girls kick him in the balls sometimes because he kind of deserves it. But other times he pulls their ass out of the fire because he knows what he's doing. And some of the characters on the ship are total girl bosses, and others are kind of nerds, and others are, you know, kind of princesses, right? The point is there's different types of characters. So these writers here think emasculating every man in their movie is what makes a good movie. Tom says, I can see your animosity toward this movie, just as a DM would dislike players who don't take a TTRPG seriously. Humor is a big part of any real tabletop RPG. Friends like to tell jokes and have fun, but ideally, humor is less important than creativity, immersion, and a good story. Yeah, I agree. And, you know, understand, I am not putting down people who are silly and memeing and making fun of things and having a fun time playing the game. That's not what I'm critiquing. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, because there isn't. And I'm not even saying that people who are more casual and don't take it that seriously is a bad thing. I do think, you know, you got to read the room. If you're part of a game that's taking it more seriously, you should take it more seriously. But if you're kind of a group who want to do a more casual thing where it's mostly a spoof or it's a joke, that's fine too. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you're adapting the world of Dungeons and Dragons. My animosity is, well, it's twofold. Number one, they're misunderstanding why the world of Dungeons and Dragons is interesting in the first place. They're confusing the gameplay for why people are interested in playing the game. And also, they're not acting in good faith because to them, this is a skin they can wear to advance their career. That's all they care about. And they don't take these characters seriously. They don't think it's possible to. They don't think you can attract an audience by having a well-portrayed Dungeons & Dragons movie. And in 2000, they did have a Dungeons & Dragons film with Jeremy Irons. It kind of tried to take it more seriously. And yeah, it was hokey. And it was kind of like, it kind of belonged on TV. It was like a made-for-TV movie. It wasn't that good. That doesn't mean it's not possible. That doesn't mean it's not possible to take it. And I would agree, at least on this much. I would agree that the Dungeons & Dragons universe probably needs a little bit more levity than something like Lord of the Rings. It probably needs a little bit more flexibility in how seriously it takes itself than a Lord of the Rings, because it's not, I think the world does not have the established source material of, you know, great battles between heroes and wizards and things like that. In the you know, there isn't a character lore the way that Lord of the Rings has it. So I think you need to give some latitude. But that being said, the world should seem authentic to itself. And let me just give you an example of a movie that is taking itself seriously. Super Mario Brothers. Super Mario Brothers is as bananas and wacky a world as you can possibly imagine. I don't even know how you can tell a story in that world, but they're doing it in this new movie. And every trailer I see looks like they're not adapting people playing Mario Brothers. They're adapting Mario Brothers. They're adapting the world of Mario. And they're treating it seriously. And yes, there's lots of funny stuff in it, but that's also because the world of Mario is naturally funny. The world of Mario is naturally kind of zany and off the wall. And so they're leaning into that, but they're also trying to create a true cohesive narrative. So I actually think Super Mario Brothers is a perfect example of the right way. So far, I haven't seen the movie yet, so the jury may be out. But I just want to leave you with one video to just close the loop on my point here. Let's see if I can get this to play here. Yeah, it won't play.
Behold the powers of all the dungeons and all the dragons. Olden Spice, the sacred source of eternal swagger.
This was our quest?
It's beautiful.
We braved the undead. Vanquished a displacer beast. And slayed a dragon. For this?
Worth it. This is a powerful magic that will aid us on our quest.
Need more magic than that. You're a sweaty mess.
Yeah, but why the Olden Spice? Just because you work in a dungeon doesn't mean you have to smell like one.
Good luck with that.
That's your adaptation. That's it, folks. That's your movie. Need I say more? Look at this boy. This absolute child that they have playing this character. He's not even a man. He is like a child. He's like, look at it's the Old Spice. It's the Olden Spice. Oh, look, I'm using a medievally word, Olden. This is a joke. And she's absolutely just bitching him around. And, Michelle Rodriguez, by the way, is fine for playing a girl boss. She fits that type. That's fine. I have no problem with a girl boss in the film. She's not the problem here. The problem is that every single male in the film is like this. It's pathetic. But even leaving that aside, the village idiot is certainly a requisite character in a medieval character ensemble. But is it possible to do that without it sounding like just a modern man-child? I mean, it's so pathetic. And the Old Spice thing, the monster tongue comes out of it. Nothing in the movie looks less crappy than that to me. Like nothing. Nothing in this movie looks even a bit less crappy. And this is the really disturbing thing. Okay, I had to download that video to show you the clip, but I just happened to look at the comments. I mean, how did these things slip past the internet? Old Spice is now canon. Next session, I'm going to send my character to the market to pick up some. Guarantees a nat 20 on every charisma-based roll. Since they're doing D&D version of Old Spice, I think it's time to bring the gentleman. This has got to be Old Spice, employees doing this. Please tell me this is Old Spice employees leaving these comments. Please don't let this be real D&D fans. The last person that wore the scent of Old Spice was a brave man known as Sir Terry of House Cruz. Oh my God, you're corporate. I'm excited for product. Please serve me next product. I already have the Olden Spice. Can't wait to see this movie. They you know what? A company email went out. Hey, we just posted our Old Spice spot on YouTube. If you have some time before you leave on Friday, please stop by our YouTube page and leave a comment. Engagement is important. That is the world we live in, my dear sailors and starnuts. Tom says, wow, that commercial was incredible. Okay, Tom also says, I watched the original Captain America movie recently. The humor was spot on and clever. It didn't undermine the tone of the movie or the characters. It actually made me laugh and endeared me to the characters. And that's exactly right. That is what good comedy should do. So, but yeah, that commercial was incredible, wasn't it, Tom? In all the wrong ways. It's just, please, if you are excited for D&D, in the comments, I must hear what your defense. I must hear your defense of this movie. I must understand the psychology of any Dungeons and Dragons player who thinks this is going to be a fun time. I just have to understand it. It's my current project of curiosity. I don't even really have a big dog in this hunt. It's just something that's sticking in my brain like a splinter, and I just, I need your help. I need your help to pull it. So, well, my dear sailors and starnauts, it has been a great night. I think we've made our case. You know, the talent is starting to sniff out the game. And the game is these properties, they don't care about the lore. They don't care about what they're adapting. You know, if you're liking Mandalorian, I'd also like to hear your thoughts on why. Because to me, it's just more slop. And they just keep feeding everything through the algorithm wood chipper. And I don't see any signs of it turning around. I do see signs of a lot of financial failures in the future of these films. So that is our show, Dear Sailors and Starnauts. I have posted a link to my locals page. It's a fun community I'm trying to build. Give it a follow if you can. That's a place where you can reach out to me directly, ask questions if you like. And also, I'm working on building a Swords and Starships Discord. So I'm going to put an invite link in the description below. So if you would like to join the Swords and Starships Discord, you will have a link to that. And please do like and subscribe on the video. We are growing fast. We are well on our way to 1,000. We are over 640, I believe, at last count. I try not to look too often for the sake of not being vain. So, because it is for the benefit of the channel, not for yours truly. I am but a servant. And I am your humble Captain Garrett, and I do thank you for joining on this edition of The Captain's Cast. And until next time, Tom says good night. Garrett, thanks for the show. You are welcome, sir. And until next time, I will see you out there.